are going to have a further threat towards global peace and security. By 2019, that seems a long time ago already, but only 2 years ago, by 2019, there were already more than 79 million people fleeing war and persecution and conflict, the highest level ever recorded. So those frightening statistics, I think, are a perfect reason to be focusing on this and taking stock this afternoon. And so that's why I believe this is an important event. So welcome all of you. What I would like to do is just to run through today's schedule so that we're clear how we're going to proceed. And then I'll go through a couple of housekeeping matters around the way we use Zoom and some of the other features that we've got. So I'm hoping that my colleague Isabel is able to pick up any technical issues that might emerge. If there are any issues at all, then please pop a quick note in the chat and we'll try and address those for you. So let's move on to the schedule now for the day, and then a couple of housekeeping matters. So we have a number of presentations, after which we're going to have discussion, questions and answers immediately. Unfortunately, our first scheduled presentation, which was going to be from Nabila Al-Zaim from Gaza, is not going to be happening. Nabila can't join us, unfortunately. So we're going to be kicking off with Yannick's presentation. Yannick's the founder of Spark, and I know is with us already, so I think that will work well. So we're going to kick off with his presentation. Each presentation is going to be 15 minutes long, and I will be quite strict with our speakers. And I have my 2-minute warning sign here that I will be showing you. So I would ask that each speaker does try and stick to the 15 minutes out of respect for all of us sitting in a long Zoom session, but also with the other speakers, so that we don't eat into other speakers' time or in the opportunities for more interactive discussion. So we're going to start off with Yannick. We will then move after Yannick's Q&A and discussions to James Ouma of LifeSong Kenya, who will be talking about breaking boys out of prison. After his Q&A session, we'll have a short break, and I do notice that the break is showing 5 minutes at the moment. So I think I'll take Chair's executive action and say that would be more like a 15-minute break, where I would strongly advise you get up from your seat and run around and do some stretches and some yoga. Otherwise, you won't be able to give your best in the next session. After the break, we're going to hear from Professor Rashid Gatrad, who is a patron of the Midlands International Aid Trust, going to be talking to us about their work. Again, another Q&A session. And then we're going to hear from Ben Webster of Mosaik Education. Finally, last but not least, Dr. Hanaa Albanna of Global One is going to be talking to us about gender, health and humanitarian response. And we will close by 3:30. Saif Ahmed of McAndrew Leadership will be saying a few closing words, and he's with us already. So thank you, Saif, for hosting this event. So that's the schedule. That's what we're going to be going through. I just wanted to alert you to one function that we thought might be helpful for you. If you look in the chat function of your Zoom call, which I hope you've all got access to, you will see that there's a link to a Google Jamboard. I don't know whether any of you have used this function before, but it's a really nice way of making sure that all of you who are sitting probably at home or in your offices feel that you're engaged in the discussion. So if you pop yourself into that Google Jamboard, click on that link, you will find that we've got a nice opportunity on page 1 to maybe identify what your hopes and expectations are for this event. And on page 2, if you click forward to the next frame, we've got points for discussion. And you'll find it's quite a nice way of posting your ideas. You'll see that the best way of doing that is via the sticky note function, which is halfway down the left-hand column of the Google Jamboard. So pop in a sticky note, tell us what your hopes and expectations are for the session. And also, while you're listening to people, you may want to make a note of points for discussion, just to remind yourself of of what's fresh in your mind that you don't want to forget when we get to the Q&A session. So at that point, I'm going to just check to see if there's any questions in the chat about the way we're playing proceedings. No, there doesn't seem to be. Please feel free to put any questions in the chat as well. To everyone, introduce yourself in the chat as well, and that way we can pick up your contact details if we don't know you already, but please also make use of the Google Jamboard. And without further ado, I'm going to invite our first speaker, I think, Yannick, to talk to us about job safeguarding and creation during COVID. He's going to be talking about the Middle East and North Africa region. Yannick, are you with us, and would you like to share with us? I'm just going to introduce you very briefly and to tell people that you are the founder of Spark, but you've been working in the field of development cooperation in fragile states since the early 1990s. You have an MA in International Relations and Sociology, and I can see that you've also worked for the Netherlands Minister of Development Cooperation. You've also been engaged as a researcher for the Netherlands Institute of International Relations, and you've done some work in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But today you're going to be talking about your work in the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa region, and I'd like to invite you to join us, Yannick. Over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, Susan. Thanks a lot for the introduction and for popping up the presentation. I see that you're starting it up already. Yeah, so just to start off, I mean, it's really great to meet a lot of like-minded folks, particularly in the niche sport of a niche sport. This is how one Peter Davies, he was on the some of the research for the House of Commons that he did on development aid. A Brit, who he would define our work, the field of our work. I guess that goes for a lot of us. I mean, working in fragile states and then working usually within a niche within that, I think has been yeah, quite a specific group. And I always very much appreciate these sessions because what usually comes from it is deeper conversations with like-minded organizations and particularly individuals that, you know, triggered by our presentations and our discussion can lead to concrete ways to learn from each other, but also to collaborate. So that's also an open invitation. I dropped my email in the chat so people can reach me. Very happy to discuss more. Just one thing, I do need to leave around, I mean, in about an hour when there is another conference actually about future scenario planning on Syria economic reconstruction by Brookings. So speaking of future planning, that's a long time in the future, I'm afraid. So I need to hop out at some point, but you can always reach me there and I'm always available to discuss further. Yeah, just let me start by saying something about Spark. So Spark is a Dutch non-profit established about 26 years ago in Amsterdam. We develop two things. We do two things. We develop higher education and we develop entrepreneurship to empower young, ambitious people to lead their fragile and conflict-affected states into prosperity. So we're a non-profit, although our field of work is very much working with the private sector in creating jobs or matching youth to jobs in these regions. But we take a pretty entrepreneurial approach, and the main partnerships we have in these countries are usually with chambers of commerce, business alliances, businessmen, and businesswomen associations. Well, I posted here the countries in the MENA that we are at the moment active with larger programs. So that's from Iraq to Jordan, Lebanon, around Syria, obviously, Turkey, but also further away, Palestine, Yemen, and North Africa, Libya. And what we've been doing there, maybe the next slide, if you can pop it through. Not sure who, yeah. So the way we engage, and I do want to point it out, and that was actually organically grown, and it's one of the lessons we've learned, is that we always start during conflict. And that was actually done first out of passion because you want to help during conflict, but then we found out in this terrible word of it was actually a great unique selling point, people would tell me later, that you build trust. So when you come in when people are in dire need and we provide first line support. Now in our case, humanitarian support during conflict would translate into supporting companies struggling during conflict to stay alive, or now during COVID, for example, we're helping companies in fragile state environments to produce protective gear, face masks, etc. But when you're there during the initial stages of a conflict, you actually build trustworthy relationships, and also it allows us to test our partnerships and to see who is reliable, who is delivering, but also who has a high integrity. And so we found that very important from these 2 points of view. One, build your network, but also find out who you can really collaborate with and establish yourself as a trustworthy partner. So then usually when peace breaks out, so I was not mentioning the conflict in Syria, we have small pilots there, but then we are now already planning for growth in peace. So the next conference I'll be attending is about scenario planning with bookings about what will you do once peace breaks out. And then when that happens, so we had that, for example, in Libya after the revolution, 2012. We were then able to scale rapidly on the basis of these pilots and these trust relationships. We were able to build really larger programs quickly. In the case of Libya, that was big programs in entrepreneurship support for the Libyan youth, and working with University of Benghazi doing entrepreneurship education. Then, of course, very important, and I think that will also ring a bell, and it will come back later in my presentation. In the eye of the localization agenda, of course, we are all transitional. So also we see Spark leaving these countries usually after 5 to 10 years. We've never been in countries longer, I think, really, than about 10 years. And that means that when you get into a phase where you've scaled with your trusted partnerships, I think that is also the time you should have already been talking a lot about departing and about how you're going to transfer your capabilities, how you're going to transfer even your funding partnerships to your local. So once they're up and running, we in earnest really start with this. And then we move on to step 4. We move on to another fragile state. But we do stay in touch with our partners, for example, in Kosovo, where we're no longer active. We built a big business university there, for example. So now with with some of the Syrian communities in some opposition areas, they contacted the business school and asked to see how can we build such a business school that has European accreditation. So then we're not saying let's find a Dutch business school. Now we're saying let's find a Kosovo business school, and they can be your partner and we can assist. So I also see a lot of this increasingly South-South cooperation through our former engagement areas. So maybe the next slide. Yeah, so the areas we work on, we work in 4 main areas. One is, and it's the biggest one, we support scale-up companies in post-conflict areas. That's basically companies that have a track record of 3 years already of growth, that are a bit stable, more than 5 employees, but they have a really given ability to grow. They have a desire to grow their leadership, and they're in a market segment that they can grow in. Now, we used to focus on the next one, which is startups. So we also back startups, particularly in tech. But we found, not surprisingly, that most of them, of course, don't make it. Much startup work, particularly done by humanitarians, ends up being social workspaces. Probably you probably know this stuff: weaving the baskets and soap, producing small 2-person factories, and that's all really nice. But our experience at some point was really that these would tip over. These would not be sustainable. We would invest a lot of time and money only for a very limited number of jobs created. And even in some cases, we had backfiring experience, particularly getting, for example, women into these startups, supporting companies, or let's say livelihood that was very nice, as long as the humanitarians were buying their shirts and were buying the stuff they were making, right? But then once that moved on, because it was not a true market, but it was a humanitarian market, it was a social workspace market, they tip over. And then what, of course, happened in some cases, not everywhere, but what happened in some cases, we even got like a backfiring saying, hey, you see, we told you all along, women are not good businessmen. No, they're not, they can't run a business, you see. So in some cases, we actually did disservice in helping, from a humanitarian point of view, livelihood, more social workspaces, particularly vulnerable and women. So we've shifted gear entirely now, maybe 75% to the scale up. So companies that are already have a basis, that have a financial basis to grow. And we don't engage ourselves in the vetting of these companies, but we put people from the business sector in there. The thing we as an NGO do is we make sure that we have vulnerability criteria, gender criteria in the selection of which companies we support, and that we don't support companies which would have made it anyway, because that's the other point of the scale, that you help economic development that would have occurred anyway, and then it's not for us, I think, and for our sector to engage in that. Then the bottom two, we do a lot of match up. That's basically matching youth in vulnerable situations to jobs, particularly, for example, Syrian refugees at the moment in Turkey with one of our partners, put 7,000 Syrians in Turkish companies, got them working permits. Then we train them up. We give them guidance during their placement, initial 3 months placement, and then the companies offer them a 1-year workplace. That doesn't create jobs, I must be very honest, but it basically puts vulnerable people, particularly refugees, into workspace that normally would be closed off to them. So normally it would be workspaces that would open up for the majority population, but not for the minority. So it's more an inclusiveness approach. And then the skill up, we then work through systemic change with universities and TVET institutions to change the curricula, so that basically they open a business incubator at the TVET school or at university. They open internships as part of the curriculum. They open up a traineeships program, so that we integrate our activities in institutional reform. Next slide. Be careful with the 15-minute time there. Yeah. So what would we have? What did we see during COVID? And that was what I was also asked to reflect on. I think one thing that I really want to put out there, we saw really rapid digitalization. And I saw some statistics of Google, for example, who said that they saw the data consumption grow within 3 months after the start of the pandemic, within 3 months for what they were projecting for 2 years in the future. This is a tech firm. What we saw, for example, in Turkey, we just directed, I think, €3 million of our funding that was meant for curriculum reform and for slow adaptation of digital blended learning, not online blended. Suddenly, we shifted 3 million to server equipment for 7 Turkish universities, software and training, and iPads, or cheaper iPads, for refugees, so they would move all their education online within a month. So what they were planning in years, we suddenly meant that our programs had to pivot and completely help the university in Mosul, in Iraq, we did the same thing, in Lebanon, the same thing, get them more bandwidth, get them more equipment, get them training, get the professors training, because that was really a shock for many of the professors in the Middle East, how to go online. So we had these Zoom sessions with 700 professors from the Middle East at the same time, later in small breakout sessions. And how do you teach online? Because it's totally different than classroom teaching. So we see a big acceleration of IT technology. Also in our work with startups, we see that even startup companies, some tech startup companies, growing rapidly. Sometimes we have some women-run companies that added on jobs and grew very rapidly suddenly, because they were offering technical solutions that were applicable. Yeah, so I think that's one section where we could really learn from as a humanitarian sector, where also sometimes I think the humanitarian sector is lagging behind in an adaptation of technologies. Next slide. Then, yeah, the other thing, that's another trend that I want to flag, is that we see, and I'm very happy with, is a rapid localization. So everybody has been talking about localization and nobody yet is really doing it. So I have big discussions with the Dutch MFA. For 50 years, the Dutch MFA is saying that they want to shift more funding to bilateral support to government, but also to local actors. We checked last year, we found, now they're disputing it, they're saying it's more to 5%, but we found only 1% of Dutch aid is going directly to local actors. Okay, not bilateral, but local non-state actors, 1%. So what have we been doing actually for the last 50 years in capacity building? We haven't, okay? So I think we should realize that vested interest, industry interest, keeping ourselves in our jobs, maybe not on an individual level, but as an institutional level, we have failed to really localize. Now, what I am so happy with is that because of COVID, all the foreigners were pulled out. Well, not all the humanitarians, but many actually were pulled out. And also in Spark now, we rely far more on local partners. You know, we just cannot be there anymore all the time because of closures. And this has also led to more vocal local governments. So in some of the government meetings in Turkey, in Jordan, I was told literally, either you, foreign NGOs, you either start marching by our music, you know, working through our institutions and with our local organizations and joint ventures, or please, we will deregister you. As explicit as this in Jordan and Turkey. In the recent 5 months, I had 2 meetings. And they were also feeling a bit emboldened. They were saying, look, we are now here. We can take care of our own business. And I think this is an interesting development. It's something that we should seize on. And my second position here for today would be that this is something that we as humanitarians, if we're true humanitarians, we should embrace this, we should support this, and we should accelerate this. And we should use this trend that COVID has accelerated to move to quicker localization. Although I think the side note there is that I am pretty skeptical after working 26 years in the aid that this will really happen by itself, because yeah, I think there is strong interest against it, not on a philosophical level, but on a practical operational level by organizations that would have to downsize as well in the West. Next slide. Yeah, so then I come to the program. I will just flip through this very quickly. So the big program that I'm basing most of my lessons learned on is a large program we're now mobilizing. I think we're 55% or 50% mobilized right now on a 100 million euro or $120 million program in the MENA region, where we do job creation amongst those 4 areas I just mentioned. So next slide, for the sake of time. Yeah, we based our program on a study that was done by the RAND Corporation. So they did an extensive study, can be found online. I would really recommend anybody to read this. Also, when you work with refugee, got it, 2 minutes. In other regions, they really did in-depth research on what the Syrian refugees really need in terms of creating a business, in finding a job, what are their true obstacles. And what we did together with RAND is that they did the research. We found out when it was published, and then we approached them. We said, hey, why don't you work with us pro bono? They did it. In thinking along that we design our program so it directly answers the obstacles and the problems and the solutions that you raise in your in-depth research. So this program is now running. Next slide. In its first year. Maybe next slide. It's about the beneficiaries, refugees. Yeah. So one thing we did there, pitching back to my earlier point, is that we organized before COVID 2 huge sessions, one in Amsterdam, one in Istanbul, with 70 local partners, each 2 days. We split up amongst these 4 result areas I mentioned, from all these 5 countries, Syria and the neighbors. Government representatives, we had NGOs, we had business alliances, and they had co-creation workshops. So basically, we designed it almost as a social impact fund, right? We say we're going to build a fund. You put in, donors put in the fund, and then go straight to the local actors that are now implementing. So we are Spark are not implementing activities. We are basically just brokering between the resources and the local partners on a focused program that is conceptualized by research by RAND. Next slide. Yeah, so one example on the digitalization that I mentioned. So we work with a group, Jusur, established by Syrian business people around the world, expats that wanted to give back to Syria when the conflict hit. They're running the part on startups, online boot camps, particularly women in business. I think on their online registration last month, they got 6,500 Syrian refugees applying to get training in how to set up a business. I think 1,000 got through because they have already a small enterprise and they want to grow. Yeah, also because they run everything through their technical solutions online. I was actually quite impressed how they were able to adapt to the environment. And since they focus mostly on tech companies, I think it's easier for them to do so. Next slide. I will skip this one. I'll just mention in one sentence. So with the Islamic Development Bank, you also see it here. We as Spark, maybe just one thing to also reflect on that grew organically over the years. We get about soon half our funding and also institutional support from the West. So that's our own government. The Swiss government is not here. Yeah, they're there. EU. But we also get now half from Islamic Development Bank, from Qatar, from the Emirates, from Saudi Arabia. And what we do is we build these programs together, also pulling in more and more funding sources from the region itself, which is not just financially interesting. Actually, it is more cumbersome to manage all these different streams. But in terms of concepting and getting solutions, I am so happy we did this, because the added value of thinking, for example, how to approach women entrepreneurship, getting expertise from the gender team from the ISDB for a Western Amsterdam-based NGO was essential to make it work in the context of the MENA. I think some of the folks here in Amsterdam, lovely folks, including myself, but I think our concept of how to get women into business in Yemen, you can't do it in a Dutch way. You know, you need expertise from, for example, folks from women experts from the ICB in Jeddah. Actually quite progressive. I was quite shocked how progressive their thinking is, but tackling it in manners that we would not think of as a Western actor. Next slide, last slide, I think. Yeah, so I'll leave it here. I can keep on going, but maybe to wrap it up. Yeah, so I think that really working lessons learned in fragile states, start early, right when the conflict hits, but then build it up, hand over early, really do it. COVID is really helping to accelerate that localization and handing over. If we truly want this, and this is really one big disappointment I have a bit with the sector, I think that we still need to get there from side of political willingness, but also utilize this crisis to really accelerate digitalization, build your programs with local partners, and position, in our case, as a Western actor, ourselves more and more as a broker between ideas, knowledge, and funding on the one hand, and local groups, as a temporary broker that rotates out and goes into new theaters as soon as you can, rather than this traditional setting up programs and running it ourselves. I'll leave it here, and probably we can move to the Q&A.
Thank you, Yannick. That was fantastic, and thank you for being so on it with your time. That was wonderful, great precedent to set. So I'll open up to questions from the floor, please. Please come onto mic. We have plenty of time for questions. Yannick has ranged over a really wide range of, I think, really interesting issues, particularly around localization and the hastening of the digitization agenda. But please go ahead. The floor is yours. Would anyone like to ask a question? I'm looking at the chat as well. I'm also looking at the Google Jamboard in case anyone wants to put anyone there. Okay, so I'm going to kick off with something I can see on the Google Jamboard. James, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yes. So I'll ask quickly about oh sure, yeah. Well, I know you mentioned kind of COVID-19 and that kind of unexpected phenomenon of the pandemic kind of creating an increased demand for sort of a more rapid digitalization of kind of educational institutes in the Middle East. I was wondering, you talk to this primarily as a good thing, right? As a beneficial thing. I was wondering though whether there are perhaps kind of maybe risks to this as well, sort of with this kind of more rapid drive to digitalize, whether maybe that might lead to some areas being rushed or something like this. Do you see what I mean when I say that?
No, certainly, James. Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and yes, there's many risks, and I think there is also drawbacks. Yeah, the reason I focus on the opportunity is that yeah, as an organization working in this really tough places, we've got this tendency, and we do this in purpose, always focus on the opportunity rather than the problem, because we've come to realize that there is always these drawbacks and problems. So we can probably do more by accelerating the good than by focusing on the bad. And of course, we are trying to address some of it. So let me make that practical. So for example, one of the things we did is a survey amongst refugees, like how is online education for you? I mean, how is it working for you? That was quite dramatic. So for example, in Turkey, I think 2/3 were saying I can't follow it because I don't have a technical device. Or if I have a technical device, I don't have a quick internet connection. Or if I have a device and I have a quick internet connection, hey, we're sitting in a room here with 6 of my family members, so how I'm gonna follow class? So yeah, so then what we did do there is we distributed hundreds of these iPad-ish devices with a high-speed SIM chip for internet, and so you try to compensate a bit. But I would say that the divide between of course the well-offs who have a quick internet connection, a big house with a silent room, and who can get a remedial teacher from their parents paid, they will actually be quite okay. They will suffer, but not that much. The refugee, having not that access, will of course get further behind. So I think the risk of this is that you'll get a further split. No, the risk. I think this will happen. You'll get a further split between the haves and have-nots. That is one. I think the other thing that we saw is that you know, the quality, of course, is pretty dramatic at the beginning, because like a lot of these professors, 50, 60, you know, Middle East, I attended some of those Zoom sessions, and, you know, I mean, it was obvious that some of them were really having even problems to come into the Zoom in the first place, you know. So I mean, their learning curve has to be very steep. On the other hand, I think some of them really coped at the end very well, you know, like my parents now, you know, pensioners, and now they're doing everything online and with iPad, and they know all the apps, and my mother is twittering, you know, at 75, and, you know, so yeah, I think necessity pushes change, and so that's maybe again a positive thing, is that I do think that over time also the accessibility of education and the price of education can go down if you have better online solutions. You can roll it out and scale it faster also to the excluded populations. But yeah, on the short term, I think it has these drawbacks that you need to think about. And the same, of course, if I go to entrepreneurship, to say we saw with entrepreneurship, some companies, particularly in the capital, you know, well educated, already well plugged into a high-speed internet connection, you know, with friends in their circles that know IT, they were benefiting, right? And yeah, your small-time company in the countryside, you know, was actually suffering. So I think there also you will see a divide. Yeah, so I think it's in the name of the game is, I think, to see first of all, the long-term potential benefits and try to make them accessible for the yeah, in our case, for the excluded. And but I don't have any, I say, deep down, I don't have any, I say, big, yeah, like huge expectations that we can just bridge that divide. I think it will get probably worse before it gets better. Yeah.
Thank you, Yannick. Certainly what you said around digital inclusion and the gap of provision resonates with me, and that's teaching in East London. So if teaching in East London brings about the gap and demonstrates the gap in digital provision, I can imagine in the MENA region even more so. I've got a question here from Carolina, who wants to ask a question. Please, Carolina, come onto mic and ask Yannick a question.
Hi, hello. Hi. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's very interesting to see a certain positive side of the COVID pandemic that is developing possibilities of the regional development be done by itself and not by exterior organizations. And I would like to know if this movement that you said the Spark is doing of becoming a rotating broker instead of go there and doing the project by itself, it's a movement that you can expect to be widespread, or something that experience of Spark? What would you say?
Yeah, well, this is, I mean, again, like it depends the angle you take on this. Is the glass half full or is it half empty? And I think you can build a case on either side, to be honest. Personally, I think, but maybe this is tainted by my political bias, because I hope it will really have that effect, right? It's like people that are my environmental friends in Amsterdam here, they come to me and say, oh, after the pandemic, life will never be the same. We're all going to go green because we have learned that, you know, and then I always go cynical with my beer saying, you know, I bet we're all back on the beach in Turkey with these cheap airlines as soon as we get vaccinated, you know, and I'm afraid that's going to happen. So with these trends, you never know if you want to see it or if it's happening. Well, first off, I mean, you say, well, Spark is doing, I also have to be honest, like even within Spark, you know, I have difficulties. So I have offices that we set up, and then I visit one of our own field offices, and then suddenly I have conversations like, hey guys, why are you now doing direct training of entrepreneurs? Then don't we have partners for that? Yeah, but they were slow. We start doing it ourselves, you know? I say, hey guys, no, we're not doing it ourselves. Work with the partners. Maybe it's slower, but you need to build it up. And then literally sometimes people tell me, yeah, but what about my job? You know, like, okay, but you know, so even within Spark, you know, this is really tough. Okay, so, and this political objective, once it tickles down to operations and when it tickles down to vested interest, and it becomes very hard to actually implement. But I do see a trend. I do see that some donors are making it more and more conditional on their aid. I think that's very important. And so, for example, we're now negotiating in the Middle East with some Western donors, and they tell us, great that you're co-designing. Now we want to meet your partners. We want to speak to them directly. We want to hear from them. Is this also how they see the program, right? And I think that's great, because that forces us, if we were not genuine, it forces us to become genuine, because it doesn't fly anymore. I'm also very happy that these governments are now saying it, and that's new. You know, that literally sitting in a meeting with the Turkish government, you know, with 25 operators, and then the chair from the Vice President Office of Turkey ask us all to say, what is your results, you know? And if you don't have enough results, they say, hey, why not? And could you be more transparent? And then if operators say, no, we don't want to be, we had one NGO there, no, we don't want to share this, that they say, well, if you don't want to share that, then maybe we don't want to have you in our country anymore. So please make up your mind, you know? And of course, this can also be abused sometimes for political reasons. That's when it gets scary, right? Because you can get political. But I think the part where governments are becoming more, and also local organizations are becoming more self-aware, you know, like, hey, wait a second, without us, they cannot be here, I think is a trend that I'm seeing. I don't think
it's
it will
empowerment movement, I would say.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think, but I think it will not happen by itself. And yeah, and to give one concrete example, for example, here in Holland, traditionally all the aid goes to Dutch NGOs, or almost all. Like there is this €1 billion tender every 5 years, and traditionally only Dutch NGOs could apply. So one friend of mine, he was in the parliament and he wrote a motion to the minister saying, hey, very simple, 2 lines. Any future tender should be open to Dutch NGOs, but likewise directly to the NGOs from the countries that these activities take place in, on an equal level. First, he said they should get a preference, but then because of pressure from the sector, he made it equal. Okay, equal. Now, what happened next was interesting, is that 3 of the 4 biggest organizations here in Holland, they sent their lobbyists by the dozens to the parliament to kill the bill, to kill the motion, behind the scene, of course, right? And then our like what you have in the UK is called bond, so the Dutch bond, you know, they started lobbying against it, and we were a member. And I asked them, what is this, you know, and the lobbies denied it, and then we produced some emails, and then they had to say, okay, yes, we were lobbying against it, and we resigned from that membership organization actually a few years ago because of this, you know. But that demonstrated to its core what was the problem, you know. And yeah, so I don't know what is the solution to this. I mean, should we then, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I mean, the price of this was that as a Dutch NGO, we're still friends with 20% of the sector, but I think maybe 30% of the sector is not inviting us anymore for their events or their New Year's drinks. And they literally told me this. Some of them called me, but you're killing our sector, you know, you're getting us into unemployment. And yeah, what we're trying to say is, no, you just need to reposition yourself as knowledge broker, as funding broker. You don't need to fire everyone overnight, but make a plan for 10 years, you know. Don't rehire immediately Dutch. Maybe rehire in the region, or maybe transfer responsibilities to your regions. But I think without us all pushing for it, it won't change. Maybe that's the short answer. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yannick. Is there another question for Yannick? If you'd like to come onto microphone, then please do. I would like to ask one, maybe if I can abuse my position as chair. I think one of the things that many organizations are constantly worrying about is how they demonstrate their impact. And I wondered, Yannick, if you could share any particular lessons you've learned through the journey of Spark.
Yeah, so impact, I mean, what is interesting, and that's maybe the advantage of being so almost of a dinosaur myself now after 26 years in this sector. I remember when I started, it was all about intention. So you apply for funding, and what actually got you the grant was your intention and output, right? So it was about, I want to, like, there was a peace agreement somewhere, we would come in and say, hey, we want to do a great school. And then the indicator was so many people trained, right? So it's very, very flimsy in a way, you know, like output driven and intentional, you know, good intention and output. I mean, in the recent, I would say, particularly 10 years, we saw a few things happening. One, transparency, right? MIAT, maybe some of you know it, publish what you fund. So it's becoming more and more clear where the money is going. And then the push for impact. So to move first from output to outcome, which is basically, in our case, not how many people that we train in starting up a business or becoming better, but no, outcome means how many people did they hire? How much did the company grow? How much did the turnover increase? How much more value did the company have? Because we help them, right? And not just the help itself. No, that's irrelevant. It's about what. And now I see a trend also on outcome, which is more maybe what you refer to, which is societal level. So what is the compounded effect of all these interventions on a societal level? And are we, for example, getting systemic change? Are you getting all universities in a country to adopt internships so that their students can find a better job, right? Or are you just doing one-off activities with some of these universities individually? And yeah, so one, it's clear that this is becoming more important and that NGOs, I think in 5 or 10 years, will not be able to get more funding if you cannot at least demonstrate your outcome level. The second observation I have is that the resistance from the sector is immense. It's so immense, even within Spark. Sometimes I have these conversations, people literally coming up to me saying, yeah, but Yannick, if we measure this and it turns out that we don't have an impact, we lose our funding. I say, like, yeah, hell, we should lose our funding for that. Of course we should lose our funding for that. I mean, do you want to spend your life, turn it around? Do you want to spend your life doing stuff that's insignificant? That is just, I want to know if my work has impact. And of course you won't lose your funding, because then you will publish the result, but you will say how you're going to adjust. You will say how you're going to change. But the first reaction that I get, even in my own NGO, but especially also with some other more older NGOs here in Holland, is very often like, oh, that's dangerous, if we do impact, and how do you measure that? First they go like, you can't measure it. Well, then, of course you can measure it. You've got great works by Esther Duflo, right, who won the Nobel Peace Prize from it. She's extreme, Duflo, in measuring, but there are simpler methods as well. So yes, I think the trend is that you must do it. If you don't do it in the next 5 to 10 years, then get out of the way, because it will not be enough anymore. I think it's a good thing. And I think the big thing is to break the mindset that that is dangerous. Yeah, maybe with one small side note is that you have to keep it realistic. So I think, if you start doing it as an NGO, you do it gradually. Don't start by implementing the heaviest, biggest system from the beginning, but take your organization along, start by some first outcome, then move to impact, level, so higher level. Start by a pilot, get people to get also your own staff to understand the importance first, because otherwise you're going to face a lot of resistance.
Thank you, Yannick. Really interesting answer. So a call to all of us to take impact seriously and not be put off by the arguments that how can we possibly measure it? Really important. So thanks again, Yannick, and for joining us, for sharing your expertise and time. And hopefully you can continue to be part of the McAndrew family, and we can continue to share good practice across the sector with you. So without further ado, on behalf of all of us, thanks to Yannick. I'm going to invite shortly James Ouma of LifeSong to present to us. But before we do, though, in the interest of health and safety, I would like to suggest that all of you switch off your cameras, switch off your mics and stand up and stretch, because we are otherwise going to be sitting for far too long. So make yourselves comfortable, everybody. Just stand up and stretch, and we'll give James a time to think that he's going to be on in about 2 minutes. Let's be back in 2 minutes. Hi everyone, welcome back. Hope you've had your stretch. I think it always feels a bit better when you've just been sitting even for 20 minutes in our Zoom life that we're all following at the moment. So just to remind you that in the chat we've got opportunities to give your contact details. Please note that Yannick has put his email address in the chat, and we're continuing to use the Google Jamboard as a way of just recording points for discussion as we think of them, as we listen to people's presentations. I can invite you to use that. Isabel will put the link again in the chat for you. So please continue to let us know your hopes and expectations for this session and issues for discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome James Ouma from LifeSong Kenya, which is an NGO focused on empowering male teens. to see their possibilities in life through a variety of projects. And he's going to be talking about breaking boys out of prison. And I'm really looking forward to this. He's going to give us an insight into his work. So I believe that there's a presentation that James has that Isabel will be going through. But over to you, James. Welcome. Lovely to have you with us. If you could try and stick to the 15 minutes, that would be fantastic. I'll give you a 2-minute time warning, but over to you. Thank you, James.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I'd sent a presentation. I don't know whether you have it.
Isabel will be sharing it now. Don't worry,
Okay.
it will come any minute now. I did see it there in the Google Drive, Isabel.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so I believe I can start off even as she's setting it up. Yeah, so thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is James Ouma, as you heard. When I was growing up, I lost my dad when I was 13 years old. And I really thirsted and longed to have a man who would work with me. In our village, we had like a lot of men, and they're not engaged in and teaching us life skills. And so before my father died, he had like a lot of books that I used to read, and so I would get lost into these books. And so I wanted to become a writer. And so my idea was to write stories that will specifically inspire young people who need guidance to discover the treasure that they have in them, inside of themselves, so that they can discover, so that they can focus on that treasure. Along the way, I started working with young people. And then now in 2008, I discovered that I needed now to start working the talk, and applied for a job to work as a TV producer. After getting this job, I started the boys were lagging behind, and in them, I saw myself. So I would spend like a lot of time talking to these boys. Then one of my colleagues told me about boys at a juvenile prison. So when I went to this juvenile prison, I met 100 boys. And first, I wanted to to start volunteering with them every Friday during my off day, just to talk to them about life. But I discovered that these boys needed what I'd grown up needing. And so I was very scared. However, I began working with them, and I discovered in our prison system, I discovered that the programs that are there do not adequately meet the needs of these boys, because these are boys who need guidance. They need like father figures, fathers, the mothers that they've grown up with. And so I started working with the boys. I began working with the boys. Every Friday I would meet them. Then along the way, I was given a choice to choose between my work and choose between the boys. And so I quit my job in 2013 to focus on working with the boys. And so that's how LifeSong Kenya was formed. In 2017, we were working with 2 boys. We were working with 50 boys. However, there were 2 boys. Next slide. There were 2 boys. So these 2 boys, one of them, his name was Basil. And the other one, his name was Waylon. And so Basil had a mother who would visit him in prison and then get engaged in our programs. However, Waylon did not have any family who was visiting him. So if you could go to the next slide, please. And so we came to discover, hello? Yeah. So we came to discover, so this is Basil. So Basil with one of our visitors who had come to our program. And so we came to discover that because Basil had a mother, had a family that was more understanding, Basil left prison and later on went to college where he studied electrical engineering. Next slide, please. Yeah, so Waylon. Yeah, so this is Waylon. So we've been with Waylon for the longest time ever, since 2017. However, because Waylon comes from a broken family, Waylon has never fully reintegrated into the community. And so we discovered that what we needed to do, we discovered that we needed to have like a halfway house whereby boys who have not fully reconciled with the people that they've wronged, they can come at our halfway house so that we can help them, perhaps by getting jobs, getting counseling, getting mental wellness programs, and at the same time link them up with job opportunities. We provided like Wailong with so many things, as in even like my family and I usually comes from from sleepovers when schools are closed. However, he's never like fully gotten over the experience that he went through in prison. Next slide. And so 75% of the male teens we've met in prison are like Wailong. They have families that are not stable, even in court, as in they don't attend court cases. And so when even these boys are released, they don't even come to pick up these boys. And due to the conditions in our prisons, we find that these boys need to be taught again, as in how to believe in themselves, how to even learn new things, how to even ask for permission, even even to dream of having and getting good things in life, which doesn't happen when they leave prison. So when they don't have like a halfway house, which we're planning to to provide, you find that these boys, they go back in the community. They find that the family is not willing to welcome them back. They join gangs and reoffend, and then either get killed or they get arrested and come back to prison as hardened criminals. Next slide, please. And so what LifeSong Kenya is trying to do, what LifeSong Kenya is trying to do, we are trying to like provide these boys with the life skills, and especially life skills that we've learned ourselves. So you find that like most staff members in LifeSong, they are men who have gone like through tough conditions when they are growing up. And so most of them had skills, most of them had gifts that they focused on. And so they're currently using those skills and gifts to earn an income. And so like myself, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a writer. So I've started earning an income through creating content and also through creating websites. And also a few hours ago, I was delivering some packages for our clients using my bicycle. Next slide. So I think I've gone this I've gone through this, but our organization focuses on breaking boys out of prison through skills training, character formation, mental wellness, healing, and conciliation with their families, the police, and those who they've hurt. Next slide, please. Next, the next one, if you don't mind. Our impact. The impact that we had so far is that over the 7 years, we partnered with parents, youth, and prison staff members to serve over 1,220 boys. We had over 10 cases withdrawn in the court after we put together the families, the boy, and the people who had been wronged. We've had over 100 boys graduate from our computer classes, and also we visited over 150 families. Next slide, please. So the challenges that we are facing, because LifeSong is not funded, because we don't have like major funding and resources, we usually use our own income. And so because of this, we are not able to have a consistent program in prison. Our idea of having a consistent program in prison is being there from Monday to Friday, and also meeting families, meeting police officers, and also meeting the people who have been wronged. And so also the challenges also that we face is that lack of proper transition programs from prison. The third one is poor cooperation from relevant authorities, families, and the communities. The next slide, please. So far, for the past 7 years, we've sustained our programs in prison by individually earning an income, through creating content, creating websites, and so far we have 5 clients whose websites we are working on. During COVID, we started delivering even food packages to families who needed food using our bicycles. And so far we have 5 clients who are paying us for our services. Even today, I was able to earn $3 from what I did. So it was a distance of about 10 kilometers. So I was able to earn about $3. Yeah, we've also started a chicken rearing project where we currently have 4 chicken. We're also running a small shop where we usually sell eggs and other essential households in the community. We've also been cycling to raise funding for our work, and this will be our 4th year. So this year we are planning to cycle so that we can be able to buy a piece of land where we can start building a halfway house. We came to discover that renting a facility will be very expensive in the long run. And so we thought that it would be wise for us to just have our own piece of land where we can start building and then gradually have our own facility as time goes by. Next slide, please. So prisons programs are not very easy because you are dealing because you are dealing with individuals first and foremost who have given up on themselves, and so it's like you start building them up, so you have to like speak to their inner child, which is not very easy. So we've come to discover that that in order for us to have a consistent program for a whole year, we will need $85,000 for us to have a bigger income. The other things that we need is partnership with with other organizations that are already doing the kind of work that we are doing, especially in the US, in the UK, and in and in Australia. In Australia. Yeah. So also introduction to policy makers who can help push our government in implementing some of our transformative programs. The other need that we need to be met is meet individuals who can offer mentorship, advice, support, and links to their networks and company CSR projects. For me, I've gotten into a journey I've gotten into a journey where I need mentorship, as in even my staff members, we need mentorship so that we can know how can we lead, how can we fundraise, how can we connect with others, and also how can we run programs that are very impactful. Next slide, please. So we can avail our detailed budget upon request. Next slide, please. I think I've touched on some of our future goals, which is providing a halfway house for boys exiting juvenile prison, and also boys who have been abused at home and they need a shelter, and also hold sporting activities for boys during school holidays, and also create job opportunities through content writing, web designing, bicycle deliveries, chicken rearing, and etc. And by the way, this is Wailong. This is Wailong in the picture. Yeah, so so this is Wailong who we've been working with, and we really trust and believe that he will become a better man. Next slide, which I believe is the last one. Yeah. For the past 7 years, I've learned valuable lessons. I've learned valuable lessons that I would like to explore. I would like to explore in order for us to see how much impact we can have in the lives of boys. And mostly for us, okay, we usually just focus on one boy, and then I'll let this boy know that we expect of him also to go out there and also have impact on other 5 boys, so that within 5 years we can have like a ripple effect that we can achieve in the long run. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, even to share my journey with breaking boys out of prison.
Thank you, James. That was fascinating, all the way through from your personal experience through to the big issues of sustaining an organization, trying to demonstrate its impact, trying to fundraise for work that involves offenders and ex-offenders, really challenging work at the front lines. So thank you for that. We appreciate it. Are there any questions for James? If you'd like to put a question in the chat, I'm happy to read that out. Equally, if you'd like to put your hand up or come onto mic, I'm sure it's nice for James to see your voice, your face. Thank you. Mustafa, you're going to be asking a question. Over to you, and then I'll come to the chat questions. Mustafa, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Susannah, for the opportunity. Hi, James. It was very inspiring. Thank you very much. It reminds me actually 3 words: the pain, the problem, and the solution. I take the privilege to introduce myself again. I'm the newly appointed CEO of McAndrew Leadership. It's a pleasure to be a part of this actually conference, and I'm so excited that we have such outstanding speaker like yourselves. So just a quick question to you, brother. Going through such transformational journey, actually it's not easy. You made it look so simple, we suppose. Would you please tell us your secret of keeping yourself motivated, energized, despite all the challenges? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. I think for me, I won't lie, as in, there's so many times where I've just been saying, as in, I didn't know what I was getting into. Because these are boys whose faces I can share even online. And so even helping them is very difficult, even for people to help, because they're thinking you can't share their faces. So are you really helping them? But what keeps me motivated is the fact that there's one boy whose future life, whose children, whose wife, whose, as in, their lives are going to be better as a result of me getting engaged with him and just letting him know that he has treasure in his heart, and he can only tap into that treasure and then use it going forward so that he can become a better man. So that is what keeps me motivated. Yeah.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Mustafa, for kicking us off there. I'm going to go to a question in the chat now from another James. So James to James. He asks, has your organization's fundraising plans been disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes. Okay, like we had a few people who were supporting us, and so it was hugely disrupted. Also because prisons were closed. Immediately COVID-19 happened, prisons were closed, and so we were not going to prisons. However, we thought of feeding, as in, okay, like of doing something in the community instead of us just sitting down. And so we started offering a food care package for about 30 families last year, whereby we will sit down with these families, and then now we will just go into, okay, like their normal budget, and then okay, the things that we usually budget on, and then now the things that we will see are not necessary. Okay, like for example, like TV, internet, okay, like phone calls. Then we will tell them that unless this is okay, like adding value into your family, unless it is something that you're going to earn on, okay, like we're going to cut it off. And so what we will do also, we will sit down, okay, like with shops where they will normally buy, and so we will pay directly to these shops, and then now these families now will just go and pick food from there. Yeah, so that is what we've been doing throughout COVID.
Thank you. I'm going to combine two questions together that I've seen on the Google Jamboard. And I wonder if, for the benefit of those people who may not have heard of restorative justice, you could explain how that works and how it helps you break the cycle of reoffending.
Yeah, so the way we understand restorative justice is that usually when you go to prison, usually everyone is innocent. Even people who have done something, they're usually innocent. But for us, we teach our boys how to take full responsibility for what they've done. And so this now helps them also to start now having the inner healing. Oh, that by the way, I did this something, like this woman who perhaps was going to work, I snatched his, her bag, I snatched her mobile phone. So as a result of this, she not even maybe able to maybe go for a job interview or even go to work. And so we let them know how this was harmful. And so what we do now is that now, once we met this boy, we share with them, and then now, they let us know the person that they wronged, their families, the police officer who had arrested them. And so our task now is to go and visit each and every person. And so in doing so, then we share with the woman whose phone was grabbed, we share with the police officer, and also we share with the family the need of this boy, as in not staying longer in prison. Because some of them, you find that, that they've been arrested for having been playing with a phone that had been stolen. And so for them, they don't know that this phone had been stolen by their friend. And so what that now does is that now it helps now even the community realize that this is our son, this is our boy. Perhaps this is even, like my daughter's friends, maybe even my daughter's boyfriend. And so what do I now do in order to help him become a better person? So, so when the community sees that the person who had been wronged has forgiven this boy, they're able now to give this boy opportunities. And so when this boy now comes out of prison, it's much easier for him to get restored into the community, because the community has seen that the policeman, the person who had been wronged, and also the family has given him a second chance. So it's easier for them to give this second chance. And so by doing so, it restores this boy back to the community. So we find that everyone is everyone is satisfied, as in the boy has paid for his mistakes, the boy has also amended for his wrongs, and also is being fully forgiven by the community. Yeah.
Thank you, James. And comments in the chat are saying how inspiring we're finding your motivation and your courage as well. I want to invite Magdalene from Uganda, who wants to ask a question. She's going to come onto mic. Over to you, Magdalene.
Hi, James. Thank you so much for taking the courage to do this project. We work with former child soldiers, and I do understand the complexity of reconciliation between perpetrators and victims. And also sometimes it's a little hard to reintegrate these boys into the communities, I imagine. So I was wondering if you have any additional support in terms of psychosocial support or anti-stigmatization training for rehabilitation to the boys, either with families or with the communities where they interact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Magdalene, for that. So what we come to realize, so we've come to discover that they also need help, even the families themselves. So what we've been doing is that the families who we are able to visit, we are able to sit down with them, and then now get to understand and fully understand their needs, and then now we meet those specific needs. And so for me, psychosocial support. So what we've been doing is that we just been using our time. However, we know and we realize that we need external help that will be able to now help us fully meet the needs of these families and the needs of the boys. Yeah, so it's something that we are still working on, including in our program. But individually, we've started just giving the support and working with the families whose boys are in prison.
Magdalene, did you want to come back and ask? I can see she's offering to share some resources with you there. But if there's anything else you'd like to say, Magdalene, then do, because I recognise your question is quite complex.
Okay, thank you for giving me the forum again. Yeah, I'm open to sharing with James, some of the resources that we have in terms of, training manuals or how to organize such programs to support rehabilitation, because I really understand that the complexity of the context that they're working in. And I think we've faced similar challenges before, but we've also been supported with different organizations. So I guess you can reach out to me through my email, and then we see how to move forward from there to support your program.
Thank you, Magdalene. Maybe you can pop your email in the chat, and then we've got a contact for you. That'd be fantastic. And likewise, James, I was going to say I have a contact who's working in restorative justice in the jails of Sao Paulo in Brazil, who I know would love to be in contact with you and also could share resources. So I will pop her contact details in the chat for you as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
That's the nature of these events, isn't it? It has to be a flow. It's a conversation. So talking of the conversation, anyone, is there another question for James before we tire him out completely? I'm just having a quick look on the Google Jamboard.
I have one.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Pop on. Yeah, thank you very much for that. It was really interesting. My question is just, well, it's more of just a statement really, but I would be interested to hear more about the concept of positive masculinity and how you kind of use this within your programs.
Thank you. Yeah, so, wow. These are things that I had to learn the hard way, having grown up with my mom and around a lot of women who were very supportive of her and even of me. However, their needs that they were not able to meet, and so especially like giving me tough love. That's the kind.
We just lost you there, James. We'll just wait for you to unfreeze and then begin to pick up again. We seem to have lost James. Okay, James, if you can hear us, it might be a good idea just to switch your camera off and then back on again. Oh dear, we've lost James for the moment. Hamid, I've also noted that you want to ask a question. Imogen, do you want to have a little pause while we see if we can get while we get James back? Sorry, we broke in halfway through his answer to your question. Isabel, any hope we can get James back?
Yes, I will let you know if he comes back. He at the moment left the conference.
Okay, I imagine he's going to try and pop back. It may be that he just lost Wi-Fi access. This is one of the problems, isn't it, we all face. So what I'm intending to do, everyone, just so that we begin to get a sense of where we're going with this, once we've had the last few questions for James, I think we'll take a break, probably run from 1:30-ish through to just before 2 o'clock, and then we'll resume at 2 o'clock for then pick up nicely with the pace of the presentations. And we've got 3 presentations left for us this afternoon. If we are unable to get James now, then we may need to break early and we can pick up with him if he joins us later. Maybe you can make contact with him, Isabel, and say, Isabel, and say we would like him to join us shortly after the break, just to see if we can get him back. Would that be all right? Yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, all right, so that's what I suggest we do, everyone. We'll break now. Ah, he's here, James, yay.
Yeah, sorry.
You're back. That's fine, don't worry, we understand. We lost
power.
That's fine, these things happen. So do you want to resume your answer to Imogen's question about positive masculinities?
It's because it has gotten me into a metaphor of power. We've just lost power. And so usually, so these young men, we're teaching them how to be leaders. And so you cannot lead if you don't know how to use your powers. If you don't know how to even be, maybe be in touch So these are boys who usually maybe they don't even appreciate their mothers. They're like, okay, because I've lacked a father figure and I'm looking for a father figure, so they don't appreciate this mother. And so it means that they don't even know how to treat her. And so that basically means even if they have girlfriends also, their girlfriends are also going to suffer. So we just teach them how to use their masculinity in a very positive way. And that can only happen when they discover the gifts that they have, and then now focusing on that, and then now on how to become a better person. And then now don't steal from someone, don't harm anyone, and then now just use your power to become a better person. So it's something that we're still like, okay, like developing. Yeah.
Thank you, James. Imogen, did you want to come back? Has that answered your question?
Yeah, that's answered it. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. So Hamid, do you want to come onto mic? Nice to see you there. Over to Hamid, you've got a question for James.
Thank you, Susannah. Thank you very much, James. Yeah, I'm really impressed here. Definitely, you are a really great man of dream. So my question is around your dream. What is your biggest dream in your life? Number one. Number two, definitely, you have actually experienced lots of challenges. So what was the biggest challenge you faced and how did you overcome that we can get actually lots of lessons from? Thank you very much.
Yeah, so my biggest dream has always been to earn an income from my writing and also write books that will inspire, especially boys and men, so that they can become better people. Then now, after meeting these boys, my second biggest dream has been to now provide programs that will truly have an impact in their lives, their families, and also prevent other young men from getting involved in crime. The biggest challenge that I've had is that in 2008, I got a job that I didn't train for. It's a job that when I was growing up, I wanted to have this job. However, after meeting these boys in prison, and I was given like a choice to choose between my job and the boys, I chose the boys. And I started having like a lot of challenges, a lot of them having to do with a lot of rejections. And so I also like have this kind of a stigma whereby if I tell guys that okay like when they ask me what do you do, then I tell them that I'm trying to empower boys who are in prison. So immediately they start looking at their their phone so that they can secure them. So for me, the biggest challenge that I've been having is that we are trying to empower boys in the midst of girl empowerment, which now it looks like for us now, okay, like it's like we're supporting crime, which is not the case. For us, we're just trying to help these boys make amends for what they've done. And so usually when we're cycling, people are like, why are you suffering for these boys? Why are you suffering for boys who have done wrong and they don't deserve like a second chance in life? So for me, those are my biggest challenges. And also the other challenge is that now you find that now personally, I don't have like finances, but now you come to find that the programs that we're doing need finances. So people are like, if you are in luck, why then now try to help people? As in, how can you empower people in areas that you are lacking in? As in, okay, like financially, you are lacking. The job that you are doing, you didn't study for. The job that you quit, you didn't also study for and you left it, so you are a fool. So for me, I'm just trying to, it's something that that each and every time, what gives me the motivation, like I'd mentioned, is just focusing on one boy. So usually I focus on just one boy, even though I have like 50 boys, but then again, I just focus on just having like a bigger impact on the life of one boy. And then so now after I've done this one boy, then I move to the next one. So within 4 months, I shall have now worked maybe with 5 boys. Yeah, so I don't know whether I've adequately answered your questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you, James.
Thank you, James. And I think with Hamid's permission, I'll use that question to throw out to everyone else just before we break for a little midday repose, shall we say, and just invite those of you with us who would like to share either on microphone or in the chat or in the Google Jamboard, what motivates you? Because I think what James has shown us is just how important and significant the issue of how we keep going, how we fight against what seems to be insurmountable odds, and what is it that keeps us in the process? What is it that keeps us on that journey? If anyone would like to share with us about their motivations, that would be a lovely way of just breaking for our lunch break, or non-lunch break for those of you fasting. I recognize there'll be many of you fasting. Anyone want to share with us? Hamid, I'll put you in the spot if you don't mind.
Hi, Susan. I was actually about to take the break. Yeah.
Don't take the break. Please just share with us what motivates you, and then we'll let you take your break.
My main motivation is actually I get lots of pleasure in helping people. When I see that people are uplifted through little bit of our support or contribution, that actually motivates me, because everybody has enormous potential to grow. Like James is actually a great example before us. Yeah. So when a little support, yeah, can motivate people to unleash their potential, that is the greatest motivation. And in my life, I saw not hundreds, thousands. So restoring hope is actually a great job. If you can actually restore hope among the people, we can see that many people can thrive. Yeah. And when we see people are thriving, that gives us more motivation to do more. I think it makes sense here.
Thank you, Hamid, and really nice way to just end our morning session. So once again, on behalf of all of us, James, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you and the rest of you will join us for the next session, which is going to begin at 2 o'clock on the dot. So I'd like to invite you to cameras off, mics off, but stay with us and have a stretch. Please look after yourself, and we'll all resume at 2 on the dot, where we've got 3 more really interesting presentations. Thank you, Isabel, for keeping us going. All right, see you all later.
its £87 million 4-mile northwest relief road linking Cherncote with Battle expressed ambition to take traffic out of the historic medieval town centre. Not everyone.
Hello, Dr. Gatrad.
Hello, hi, Susan.
Hi, hi.
Sorry, I had a slight emergency. I've just finished.
That's fine.
So
I just
I'm
wanted to.
slightly out of breath.
That's fine. There's absolutely plenty of time. I saw you there, so I thought I'd better let you know we're having a break.
Yeah, sure.
And we will all be resuming at 2 o'clock.
Perfect.
So that's why you won't find anyone here.
No, that's fine. That's
so
great.
I will bring us all back at 2 and open introduce you. We're trying to stick quite carefully to 15 minutes.
Fine. Okay.
Each person. I'm sure you're going to be using a much shorter version of your slide set.
Well,
I know
what I'll
you have
do,
about 118 slides.
I know there are loads of them. I mean, I've got something like a million slides, but I've actually been for various, because I'm involved with WASSUP, which is World Against Single-Use Plastic, and that has taken up so much of my time. So I actually prepared this very quickly.
That's fine.
With a view that I will actually skip a couple of slides and go quickly. Yeah.
Or maybe because it can be quite disconcerting if we just see file, images scrolling by. It might be easier just to choose an image and talk to that image, just to give us, because it's easier to engage, I think, on Zoom when you just hear something.
Okay, so just give me, what I'll do is I'll go into my presentation now and see if I can cut out some bits.
Yeah, otherwise it can be a bit.
But I had a quick go at it yesterday.
Okay.
And I was able to finish it in about 16, 17 minutes.
That's fine. Then that's fine. Yeah. Then don't let me inconvenience you. That's absolutely fine.
I think it's the, I will concentrate on the, in my introduction, because it's two countries where my impact on my work is basically in Pakistan and in Malawi. So I'll say that in the introduction.
No problem.
But I will mention, I'll hone in on those as we go along, and then I'll just give a flavor of what's happening elsewhere.
Super. I'll
Yeah.
see you.
Okay. So I'll be able to give them. I think what I want to do is to make a point is that over 20 years, this can be done, and then in the questions, we can talk about the challenges and the fragility of what you do.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah, that's what I thought I would look at, because there's 15-minute questions as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll do that. Hopefully, it's actually I have not prepared something so quickly as I've done this one, because it was shorter notice. And I think Nell actually changed the date as well, I think, didn't he, as well, or something?
I'm not sure about
the
background.
You see, in fact, I put in
sorry, I'm going to have to go. I'm just
okay.
on the break right now, and I thought I just wanted to see you there.
Okay, no, you carry on. I will use my own presentation if you give me the sharing of the screen.
That's what Isabel will do. I'm not in the back.
Okay, fair, fantastic. Okay,
Isabel will do that. Okay,
great, lovely. Thank you.
Bye.
See you later. Thanks. Bye, bye.
Hello everyone and welcome back. We're now 1 minute to 2. Just calling you all back into your rooms if you care to join us. For those of you who are with us this morning, thanks for rejoining. And those of you who were not, welcome. This is the second part of our day conference, Working in Fragile Context, Challenges for Humanitarian Missions, hosted by McAndrew Leadership. And we're delighted to have you all with us. We've had a fantastic morning, very discursive, very interactive, with presentations around job creation in the context of Middle East and North Africa, and also working with offenders in restorative justice processes in Kenya. Very motivational, very interesting talks that raised a lot of issues around how we can measure our impact, how we can keep up our own motivation. So I'm Dr. Susannah Pickering-Saqqa. I teach at the university and research at the University of East London. And I'm delighted that we're going to have 3 fantastic presentations this afternoon. We're going to start off with one by Professor Rashid Gatrad of the Midlands International Aid Trust. We'll have plenty of time for questions and answers after his presentation. And we're then going to move on to Ben Webster of Mosaik Education. Again, some Q&A opportunities. And last but not least, Dr. Hanaa Albanna from Global One, talking on gender health and humanitarian response. We have several ways of keeping this interactive rather than a one-way flow. One of those is to pop your thoughts and questions in the chat, so that if you aren't able to come onto mic, you can ask me to ask those questions of the speaker. The second is that we have a Google Jamboard, which enables you to capture any thoughts and ideas you have as you're listening, and then I can ask those questions. And maybe Isabel will be kind enough to put that link in the chat again for those of you who need to have a look at that Google Jamboard. Thank you. And last but not least, of course, is your own wonderful human voice. It would be lovely to have your voice asking questions directly of our speakers, because it can be quite uncanny speaking to what feels like a bit of a void, and it's lovely to hear actual questions coming from you. So we're trying to keep this interactive. I would ask that all of you who are not speaking would just try and keep your microphones off. That will keep things flowing nice and smoothly. So without any further ado, I'm going to invite Professor Gatrad to speak to us. I was having a look at his bio earlier, and I was really so overwhelmed by all the things that he's done. I thought I would highlight the thing that struck me the most, that he's actually been awarded a Doctorate of Science from the University of Wolverhampton, for his global humanitarian work. And I think that says it all, that his global humanitarian work has been recognised to the extent that he's been given, amongst all of his other qualifications, an honorary Doctorate of Science from the University of Wolverhampton. So welcome, Professor Gatrad. We look forward to hearing from you. And I have the dreaded 2-minute sign that I will show you if we
okay.
come too close to it. Over to you.
All right.
Thank you.
Lovely. So can I sharing screen, yeah? If I could share the screen, please.
Yes, you should be able to share now.
Okay. Perfect. Can you see this okay, sir? Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it'd be lovely to have that on slideshow, and then it'd be
lovely. Now, thank you
Great.
very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure being here. I'm sorry I couldn't join you this morning. I'm a consultant pediatrician by trade, but for the last 20 years, I've been involved with Midland International Aid Trust. So there are two of us that work here. He's the chairman. He invited me to be a chief executive 20 years ago. Our main vision is to empower girls and women, go to the needy wherever that be in the world, and go to remote places and provide free treatment and training. And we've done all these things, which I'll briefly allude to, vocational training, limb fitting, cataracts, all these I'll just go through briefly in a minute. That's our remit over the last 20 years. So we worked in 20 countries, two of them that I'll highlight to you today. One is Pakistan in general, and the other one is Malawi, where I was born, because those are the countries where I have got infrastructure to be able to do big things. Other countries, generally, it's about firefighting, often as a result of man-made or natural disasters. So we talk about cleft palate, changing lives. Now, my philosophy has been to try and see if we can change lives, particularly for girls, so that they don't go onto the streets, go begging, and go being trafficked subsequently and exploited. So my philosophy has been to look at disabled children in particular and get them educated. So I built this hospital over a period of 10, 11 years, having raised a lot of money, and named it after my mum. So that's a 10-year job. This is a team now that travels to do cleft lip and palate operations, and they go twice a year, and they are actually funded by Emirates. So Emirates pays for 20 of us to go free of charge twice a year, return to Pakistan and back. So this is what we do. We change lives so children don't have to have hearing problems. They can join school. They can have their teeth done. They look so much better. And this is, I get involved with them, looking at them pre-operatively, get involved in operations myself, and also check them before and after. These are a set of twins that I got involved with. So all these children need infrastructure of hearing and dental. So we've involved with DFID. Here's Steve here from Deaf Kids International with Lord, I've forgotten his name now. He's from DFID. So he joined us and we sorted out the audiology project. Again, something that decreases disability and gets children off the streets. Similarly with the limbs, we've provided limb prostheses to people. This, I thought I'd better bring my dad into it, so we called it the Mohammed Gatrad Limb Center. And we've got children there as an infrastructure to get their physiotherapy done whilst they are being treated. This is a relatively new project over the last couple of years. Club Feet, we encourage children from all over Pakistan to come to our unit if they are treated immediately after birth, you don't need an operation, as you can see. Same child going through this journey, as you can see. Breast care is something that we have done over many years now. So something very difficult to do in some countries, particularly countries like Pakistan, where we have to show, well, we get ladies to show them how to do self-breast examinations, and then they're subsequently treated by the team that travels a couple of times a year. But having said that, the team trains other people, so the process continues, but not at a huge pace as it does when my international teams are there. Eye projects in Pakistan and other countries as well. I'm just highlighting Pakistan here. So we've got a journey of a lady that's being examined, operated. I'm taking this lady back to where she came from. She's had her eyes for glasses checked here, and these glasses were delivered by us from here, collected from various opticians by Miss England finalists. Children need dental care, very, very important. As you can see, that is a neglected specialty all over the world, where I think people need a lot of care to their teeth. So we've got Ian who travels with us, and I'm basically showing them a stupid thing, how to clean one's teeth. We've got village clinics. I got the MIAT got them a Suzuki to take people from the village back to the base hospital. And here we've got it's purely for elderly women and pregnant mothers. We've got clinics that provide simple things like iron, vitamin D, anti-worm treatment, infection for urines, because that actually predisposes you to early delivery. Training is so important. Training about newborn babies is my passion. So here I am training. This is some other parts of the world as well. This is Giovanni training in South Africa on how to deal with intervention cardiology. This is, I'm concentrating on Pakistan largely, University of Wolverhampton, working with us. This lady and this chap were sent on bursaries to the same hospital to train and teach. Vocational training is very important in various parts of the country. This is India. We've provided sewing machines, Malawi sewing machines, and this is Pakistan, again, where we've got ladies learning how to sew and young gentlemen learning IT skills. In India, this is Miss England, the latest Miss England, reigning Miss England. She went to the sewing center, again named after my mother here. So this sewing center and the IT center has got various facilities to make sure that people, particularly children, particularly girls, learn a trade so they can go and get themselves bread for their children. Humanitarian aids, we've had various earthquakes and floods. This was floods in Pakistan. We provided £500,000 worth of tents. And this is I think his face tells a story. So we were just providing them with food after the disaster. So Mr. Aslam, my co-worker, waiting for refugees to arrive in Lesbos. He's here in India at the Bihar disaster. We have got water projects in Bangladesh, in Malawi, in Somalia. Nepal, we have been there 3 times, built these huts, 1,000 of them after the earthquake. This is in Haiti, where we provided shelter boxes. More recently, 2019 in Kashmir, through the army, we gave food to the people who were destitute and built, just recently, this is a couple of weeks ago, we completed a school that was devastated. So that was opened 2 weeks ago. Providing toilets to girls so that they can go to school, otherwise they don't. Providing sanitary pads to girls in Gambia, Malawi, and Pakistan so they can go to school without fear of having periods. These are toilets being built, an Asian type of toilets, so that they can go to school, otherwise they don't. Sand dams in Kenya to ensure that during drought, they've got water available. We were there during the tsunami. More recently, I thought it's a good thing to give these children something to remember their youth, because all they remember is bombs and death. So we've given them hundreds of footballs so they can play around in Yemen. Malawi, again, putting my medical hat, I've given them bicycle ambulances so that they can take pregnant women to the nearest hospital. This is very near a village where there's an orphanage that we support. And here I am vaccinating children against polio. More recently, during COVID, we've been very busy. Our vocational training in India is making these masks, giving them to the Indian population. This was way before this horrible situation now in India. This is in Yemen, again, providing them with food and sustenance. Malawi, giving them masks to keep them away from infection. Pakistan, giving them food during COVID. This is Nepal, giving them food during COVID. That's just recently in Syria during the fasting month. And this is in Malawi, giving them soap and also giving them water and some sustenance. So humanitarian aid, medical aid is what we tend to do, largely in Malawi and also in Pakistan, but 20 other countries in trying to firefight them. I've written a book which actually sustains a lot of the stuff that I do and we do. So for example, the huts that we built for the Rohingyas were purely and simply sustained by the sale of this book. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I've run through this very, very quickly. I wanted to keep to time, but probably I finished a bit too quickly. So plenty of time for challenges in a fragile environment. So I'm all yours now. Thank you very much for giving them this opportunity to share our work with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Gatrad, and that truly is overwhelming in their achievements. So I'm opening the floor now to people to ask questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat if you can't come onto microphone, or if you'd like to come onto mic. I know Professor Gatrad would love to hear your voice. And we have the Google Jamboard available as well. Would anyone like to kick off? I'm going to then kick off because I have a burning question to ask you, Professor Gatrad, and maybe others will riff off the back of this. I'm really interested in the notion of empowerment.
Yes.
So I've kind of got two connected questions, I hope. The first is, how do you demonstrate the impact of girls' empowerment? And the second is, what do you think about the relationship, or what do you think is the relationship between menstrual health and empowerment?
Okay, so take the first question first. I think just generally, if you look at empowerment, you see, I'm not very keen, and I've shown you some pictures of proper humanitarian aid in terms of giving people food. And I'm not into that line. We work across borders, across religions, to make sure that we try and get education sorted. Now, if education was a theme, I'd be able to show you a few pictures of schools that we've supported in Zimbabwe, etc. So I think education is crucial. Education of women is crucial. Education of girls is crucial. Educating a girl, as you well know, is a cliche, that you educate a nation. So that, I think, is very important. And by making sure that these girls who are deaf, who can't walk, who have got funny faces because they've got cleft lip palate, we know we've got hundreds of them operated now over the last 20 years. And these girls, I've seen them grow. These girls, I've seen them get married. These girls, unfortunately, one or two of them have had children with cleft palates, which they know where to bring to. That's an important part of the work we do. And the second part of the question, what was that again, Suzanne?
Sorry, I need to get off mute. It was the relationship between menstrual health and empowerment, because I was really pleased to see that you mentioned the issue of period poverty, etc., as we would refer to it in this country. But I think there's a really interesting issue about the relationship between empowerment and menstrual health. And I wondered if you could.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there is an added thing here, which is from my practical experience, that why do girls not go to school? Okay, even in this country, They don't go during period time. And now the government is giving us special grants in this country to do so. But places where I have got access to, and my access has been through networking, through a lot of patients coming to see me from various countries. So that has made me, shall we say, known, and I've come to know a lot of people, more importantly, so that I can do some of this work. So if toilets are not there, particularly Kashmir, for example, toilets were not there, girls were not going to school. So we gave them toilets, they were able to go to school. So that's one aspect of getting girls to school. The other aspects, which is well known, is the menstrual aspect. And in Malawi, I'm working with an Asian organization, and what they do is for a $5, and what I showed you was a kit that we have, which is reusable cloth that can be used for a year at least. And we give them 5 packs so that they can use them. They're washed. And I have to make sure with my medical mind that these have not got aniline dyes in them, because those aniline dyes can actually cause cancer. So you have to be aware of what you are doing in doing good. You don't want to do bad. Okay? I hope that answers your question.
I have so many more, but I don't want to abuse my role as chair. So over to you, everyone. Any questions for Professor Gatrad around his work in Pakistan more specifically, which he focused on, but also maybe in that other long list of countries that he gave us? Barney, you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah. So sorry, I just wanted to ask Rashid. So obviously, like from the presentation you just gave, it looks like you're working across quite a few different areas. And so obviously you talk about humanitarian aid and then providing medical help in quite a few different areas as well, and then training as well. I was just wondering what you thought were the main challenges of sort of balancing those together, if you see what I mean, and the main challenges in having that many sort of different focuses and what you felt, what you feel the main challenges in that, basically.
I think the main challenge now is succession. Okay, that I'm struggling with, because I'm not getting people that are good enough to my way of thinking, who can take over from what we are doing. That's the first thing. You know, you'd have thought fundraising would be difficult, but fundraising for me is quite easy. I don't have to go fundraise. They actually give me the money now. So that's not an issue. It's not a challenge. It used to be. The biggest problem we have is when we send containers to places like Pakistan, okay, we have difficulty in, for example, those tents that I showed you, those came from China. One donor gave me £500,000 and said, I'm going to send tents from China to Pakistan. That wasn't a problem because that came free of charge. But to release them at custom was the biggest thing. We had a similar problem in the Congo. I sent reusable, good medical equipment to the Congo, like beds, blood pressure machines, etc. And they were stuck for 6 months at the port before they went up to Kano, which is where they were supposed to go. So those are the challenges. Language is always a challenge, but fortunately, in the Asian sense, I'm able to speak a lot of languages, and I can speak a couple of African languages because I went to school in Malawi and I was educated in Zimbabwe. So I can speak 6 languages. That makes it easier for me to talk to people around the country.
Thank you.
Countries.
Thank you, Barney, and thank you, Professor Gatrad. Really interesting, the issue of succession. Sometimes we can be so successful that it's very difficult to find somebody who can fill our shoes, isn't it? Any other questions around the sustainability of the work that Professor Gatrad is doing, or specific operational issues, particularly in the context of fragile areas of conflict? I noticed you were doing some work in Gaza, Professor Gatrad. Can I ask you what you do there?
Okay, Gaza, we can only do things indirectly, very indirectly. And I've done work in Gaza through the Royal College of Pediatrics. And we gave them a lot of money at a time when there were bombs being thrown onto Gaza and a lot of children had got burnt. So I knew the president of the Royal College of Pediatrics. So I think we gave them 15 or 20,000 pounds. So that was for surgeons to treat children who were burnt. That was for a specific project. But having said that, we have given food and humanitarian aid of the sort that people talk about to sustain them. at different times, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 pounds. And one of the projects we are running in Palestine is this: the people are given £50 vouchers for a couple of months to spend. So if they spend it, then they can't have any more. So they have to learn how to use those vouchers. So this voucher scheme is in Palestine through a charity called Children of Adam. So we work through other charities as well. So there are different ways of skinning a cat to get the aid there.
Yeah, and in some contexts, it's had different sets of challenges in different contexts. There's a question part offer here in the chat from James, who presented to us just before the break, James Ouma from Kenya, who says, do you need help with content writing about the work that we can help with? So James in Kenya, who you won't have met because he presented to us previously, is a writer and is working in largely with young men, some of whom are ex-offenders, some of whom are vulnerable young men. They don't wish to become offenders, and that they work a lot around trying to create positive role models with positive masculine role models in particular, and creative writing, and writing is one of the mechanisms by which they do that. So there's an offer of help here in terms of writing about your work. So I think that's really interesting that that might be a connection you want to follow up.
Actually, it is a connection I would like to follow up on a slightly different vein, if I may suggest. World Against Single-Use Plastic is a project of MIAT. It is a local project, World Against Single-Use Plastic, and it's www.miatwarsaw.org.uk. And two of my ambassadors are today listening to this work, and I would love to work with Edward. Is it Edward you mentioned?
Yes? James Ouma,
sorry,
Kenya.
James in Kenya, because we have not got a Kenyan ambassador working with us on World Against Single-Use Plastic, of which there are 4 tenets. One is raising awareness about the dangers of plastic, of which, as we know, it's already in the food chain, and it affects us through infertility, it affects us through giving cancers, and affects us through the fact that we get more infections. Now, remember fish, 2 billion people around the world rely on fish, which is where food comes in, and which is where this conference is important. If that fish dies, or the children get diseases from the microplastic, it is going to be huge. So let's actually go down a step and try and prevent this from happening. And we've got WhatsApp in Mexico, America, Yemen, South Africa, Malawi, India, Pakistan. So why not in Kenya?
Fantastic.
So I'd love to join in. So if actually Jennifer is actually with me today, Jennifer Carles. So if James was to put his, but Jennifer Carles is a 16-year-old firebrand, like forget about Greta, okay? She's a firebrand for plastics in the UK.
Brilliant. Okay.
She runs 13 countries, and she'd love to have James's contact so we can connect.
So maybe I could do something unconventional here and ask Jennifer and James, can I just ask you to come onto camera briefly, just say hi to each other, and that is the contact that you're going to make, and take that away and follow up at a later time. Hi, James. Hi, Jennifer. Meet James. That would be great.
Jennifer?
There we are, she's coming. Yeah, she just needs to put a camera on. There we are. Jennifer, meet James. James, meet Jennifer. So if you can be in contact after this event and maybe pursue what you can do around World Against Single-Use Plastic, taking that work into Kenya, that would be fantastic. So on that front, I'm going to just put a final call out for any questions for Professor Gatrad. Anyone would like to ask anything about any of the broad, incredible range of work that he does. Every time you answer a question, Professor, you come back with another area of work that I want to ask you a question about. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? It's lovely to have you with us. And
I'd like to just make a point. You see, when you've built something like this, which is that hospital where people are coming from all over. In fact, people from India have come for operations. 2 people from the UK have been there because they were on the waiting list, and they've been operated by UK surgeons in Pakistan. But you've got to provide for them infrastructure of food, blankets, for them to stay the night. Remember, they're coming from far away. So all that has got to be provided. And fortunately, we are in a position to do that.
Yeah. No, the issue of the level of infrastructure that organizations need to supply, but as well as thinking through, I think one of the key points that came out from even your presentation is the incredible creative way in which you've sustained a lot of your work. And I think it's a fantastic story that some of your work has been sustained entirely through the sales of that book. So on behalf of all of us, thank you so much, Professor Gatrad. Lovely to have you with us. Thanks for sharing your experience, wealth of experience. I'm going to invite everyone now to just take a little pause. We're going to have a new speaker with us in about 2 minutes. It's going to be Ben Webster, who's going to be joining us from Mosaik Education. But as has been our practice in this session so far, and it will continue to be the case, we're just going to put our mics off, cameras off, and stretch for 2 minutes. And then I'm going to introduce Ben. I'm hoping that Isabel can help him put his slides up in the meantime. Okay, have a stretch, please. Welcome back, everyone. So while we've been on our break, I've been using LinkedIn to connect with some of you. So, you know, around the back of our online events, we're able to keep networking, which is fantastic. So those of you who use LinkedIn, please maybe use the opportunity to link with people you're interested in talking to from this afternoon onwards. So I'm just going to check that Ben is with us and ready to go with his presentation. Ben, are you there?
Yeah, I'm
you are.
ready.
That's fantastic. So let me briefly introduce you. So Ben is the founder and chief executive of Mosaik, and he's worked for a number of different organizations previously, including the International Organization for Migration, in the Syria crisis team in Jordan. He's worked for the UK Foreign Office and Transparency International. And he's going to be talking to us today, continuing this theme of working in fragile contexts, but particularly he's going to be talking about their work on language learning with refugees during COVID-19, a subject none of us can escape from at the moment, COVID-19, but ever present. Over to you, Ben, and welcome.
Thanks, Susannah, and I will just get my slides up now. Let me know if you're able to see those. Hopefully that's...
Yes, I could see that, and then it's loading now. Super.
Okay.
Over to you.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us this afternoon. As Susannah said, I'm Ben, I'm the CEO of Mosaik Education. We're an NGO working in primarily in the Middle East at the moment, and what I'm going to talk through today is I'll give you a little bit of background around the challenges of refugee education and how they've been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll take you through how we've been adapting some of our programs, navigating the challenges of COVID-19, and innovating in the kind of pedagogy and delivery models that we've been using, and then share a few reflections and learnings from the last 12 months or so that I think are quite useful for thinking about refugee education, but also this kind of long tail of COVID-19 that I expect we'll see over the next months and years. Firstly, just a little bit about Mosaik, because I suspect we may be an unknown quantity to many of you. Our focus as an organisation is on supporting refugees to reach university. And we have two programme areas that focus on key barriers that refugees face in going from secondary to tertiary level education. One is around language learning, and the other is around English language skills, and particularly preparing for accessing higher education. And then the other is what we call academic guidance, which is essentially preparing students to understand or refugee students to understand the landscape of opportunities that they have available to them, because it has been changing and is quite diverse over the last few years. Being able to research and evaluate these opportunities, and also search and apply for funding, cost being a massive barrier that refugees face in reaching university. As I said at the start, we're working in the Middle East, and we're working in 3 countries, Jordan, Lebanon and Turkey. And I'll also just emphasize that all of our programs are kind of underpinned by 3 key principles. One is that all of them in some way are designed with refugees. The other is that they use technology in one way or another to make them more scalable and accessible. And then the other is that we make all of our programs open and accessible to community organizations with the best reach and best networks working in those 3 organizations. This may be familiar to some of you actually, who are here, familiar with the context of education in crisis or humanitarian context, and the challenges that refugees face. But I wanted to give you the kind of very foundational level context, which is a massive challenge of access to education for refugees. So the latest figures from UNHCR show that primary enrollment for refugees is just over 3/4 at 77%. That drops by over half moving to secondary education. So only 31% of refugees are able to go to secondary or enroll in secondary education. And then there's a huge drop off between secondary and tertiary. So only 3% of refugees are able to access university. Now, just to kind of put that in context with the rest of the world, on average, young people globally, 37% of young people are able to go to university. So there's a massive inequality there. And this is where Mosaik's work focuses on that bridge between secondary and tertiary. But generally, challenges for refugees that face refugees in accessing or present themselves as barriers accessing education would include things like language, certification, national policies and capacity, as well as livelihoods and competing priorities. Now that has been exacerbated, as you might expect, by COVID, and I put refugee in brackets here because I think these are challenges that are seen universally, globally around the world in accessing education. But really what this has done is deepen inequalities that we're seeing on the ground. So firstly, there's an unequal distribution of technology. A lot of learning, as people know, has been shifted online, but devices aren't necessarily accessible uniformly across the refugee population, and that has again exacerbated those inequalities. Perhaps more specifically, even within refugee populations, so we work in Jordan, there is a sizable Syrian population there who actually on average have better access to devices than smaller refugee populations, those from Iraq, Somalia, Sudan, who are also living in places like Amman and other areas of Jordan. The second big challenge is the added burden on household carers. And unfortunately and depressingly, this is largely around young women and girls, and meaning that they are having to take care of young children who aren't going to school normally. And the Malala Fund has done some analysis that suggests that only half of all refugee schoolgirls will not return to school after COVID-19. And then finally, the other impact, and again felt globally but exacerbating inequalities here, is the impact on income. And already precarious livelihoods of refugees have been affected to the extent that there are now trade-offs between food security, shelter, and the ability to pay for the necessities of education. Now, if I take you down to the context of our programming, and one of our areas, as I said, is English language programming, what are the existing kind of challenges and factors, and then how that's been exacerbated by COVID-19. For refugees, particularly in the Middle East, English is a massive barrier to education, training, and employment, and really summed up by what last year a refugee told us: if you don't know English, you can't access anything. Really, because your access to higher education, your completion of secondary education, your ability to access vocational training often depends on, particularly in technology-based vocations, requires a level of English, but also employment in a displacement of humanitarian context is often tied to or benefits from a knowledge of English. Perpetuating perhaps existing low levels of languages that refugees bring with them when they arrive in a country is the existing programs or programs that are set up in displacement contexts. And what you see there is that pedagogies are teacher-centric, textbooks are out of date or they are incoherent between levels, and there are very few opportunities for students to actually apply language in preparation for education, training, and employment. And what we were seeing at the start of 2020 as the pandemic was spreading and affecting policies and the ability to deliver, was that many classes for refugees, either in formal or non-formal education, focused on language, were reduced to isolated self-study that focused on textbooks or online materials that didn't allow for that essential communicative element, communication and human element of language and language fluency. And it's within this context that over the last couple of years, Mosaik's been developing, testing a particular approach to language learning that actually we found really fitted with the challenges of COVID-19. And we've been developing and testing a communicative pedagogy. And I won't go into too much depth in terms of the kind of technical details of what that means, but just to summarize in 3 key points. Our approach to English language learning focuses on learner-driven dialogue. So conversation is the main medium in the classroom. That means it's materials light. We don't have stacks of textbooks that are mediating between teacher and students and between students. It also means, and why we think this has been so beneficial in the context of COVID-19, because it focuses on communication between individuals, it does not require a certain piece of hardware or a certain platform or software, because if you look at a phone or a computer, it's packed full of communication software already, just used for communicating socially or professionally. And then finally, the key principle of communicative pedagogy that we're using is that we focus on the emergent language. So the interests and the lived experience and the context of the student is leveraged to become materials in the classroom. And what that means is that the subjects and the topics and the focus of the classes are of interest to the students and they're relevant. And so what we did over the course of this year, or the last 12 months, is we already had some classes that were set up working with Sudanese and Somali refugees at the start of 2019 using this pedagogy. And quite quickly we had to adapt. And in fact, over the last 12 months, we've pivoted twice to adapt the way that we're delivering English language learning and English language teaching. So we adapted our existing classes that were blended, so they were in person, but with a kind of a digital element alongside them. And we adapted those to remote online classes that were led by refugees. And that allowed us to test out these communicative techniques, but also that period allowed us to prototype and adapt these techniques for the remote online environment. And that's been a really beneficial experience working with refugee teachers, being able to understand how you adapt particular methodologies or activities to places where there are low bandwidth, where devices perhaps have unstable connections, etc. We were lucky enough partway through last year to join the Humanitarian Education Accelerator, which is coordinated by UNHCR. And again, we pivoted. So we took the teaching approach that we were using in our own classes, and then we adapted it to develop a more general teacher training program. And what we were able to build there was essentially an online training package that offered teachers a set of techniques and activities that allowed them to adapt their teaching to maintain that communicative and human level of interaction, but in an online space. And the pilot of that, we concluded the third iteration in February, reaching 60 teachers and through them, several hundred students. What that became is this toolkit that we've built for English teachers. There's two main components, a training component, which is a series of live sessions complemented with an open platform that people may be familiar with called Moodle, which is essentially a learning management system that allows for self-study. This is all available on a phone, as well as a community of practice where teachers were able to reflect on learning, share challenges and problem solve together, alongside it live through office hours, but also through a WhatsApp group. And now we actually have sustained the community and grown the community to the extent that teachers are now leading their own sessions in coaching each other and problem solving and reflecting on delivering these techniques. And quite pleasingly, when we started to try and measure the impact in the classroom, what we have found is that the teachers that went through our training, they were able to integrate these techniques and adapt existing programs. So we heard from our surveys of teachers, we found that 100% of them had integrated the techniques into their programs. 75% had improved their overall teaching practice. And perhaps most crucially, 80% of teachers reported that the techniques led to increased classroom participation. But when we started interviewing teachers after the quantitative surveys, what we found was perhaps even more pleasing, because we heard that students were more enthusiastic, they were attending classes more often, and I should say these are online classes. And one of the challenges that teachers were seeing is that students weren't attending or weren't contributing, keeping their Zoom video off during classes. But these practices were improving that. And even students were taking the activities and using them at home with their families. Perhaps summed up nicely with this quote from Hadil, one of the teachers we worked with in Jordan, that students were asking her for more classes and having them more often, which is a great place to be as a language teacher. And then finally, the other thing that we found over the last 12 months is that evaluating all of our programs is that the ability for learners to shape the education they're experiencing during a marginalized experience is so powerful, because on a daily basis, many of the students were either discriminated against or abused because of their position as refugees. They're marginalized, and therefore having the ability to reflect their lived experience, to bring things from their context into their classroom makes it much more valuable. I'm just going to finish briefly with a few challenges and opportunities that I think have come from that work over the last 12 months. Firstly is something that we certainly haven't solved and remains a massive factor, is the unequal access to technology is a significant challenge here. And so we were constantly hearing from teachers, but also with our direct classes, that students were struggling with inconsistent or unstable connections. And as I mentioned at the start, access is not uniform between host community and refugee populations, but not even within refugee populations. But one thing I would say is that a massive positive that we've observed within our own programs, but also those of our peers and other organizations working in this sector, and perhaps around the world in education more generally, are millions of examples of using open tools and technology-like solutions to improve or innovate around access and teaching. To me, that kind of speaks to something that is undervalued in this sector, which is that technologically based innovation is not necessarily a new platform or piece of software, not necessarily a new piece of hardware, but actually using lots of tools that you might have at your disposal already to provide new ways or more engaging ways to learn. Secondly, I think key from our example and other examples I've seen is that teachers and learners were the key agents of innovation here. So what we were providing is essentially a set of techniques that allowed them to or that they were allowed to use in any way they wanted in their context. And they were adapting with different software, whether it was Zoom, WhatsApp, Teams, Google Docs, to embed those communicative and more engaging practices. And therefore, focusing on that, on teachers and learners, key agents of innovation, is key in building these resilient systems. So what will probably happen with COVID-19, I expect, are these waves of infections and changing government policies, and key to building that resilience and maintaining access to education is building up the capacity here. And then finally, I think despite all these fantastic technological innovations, I think everything, not just in education, shows the value of the physical environment and interaction. But particularly within our environment, I think the key things that we've observed are around building learning communities. So that was a big challenge for our teachers and the who were starting classes online without meeting their students. But what we've seen with our community of the teachers that we trained in that community of practice is that providing leadership and ownership of that space, they're now leading coaching sessions, leading the sessions with each other, has allowed that community to develop. Other challenges I'd also note with this switch between physical and virtual are challenges around monitoring. So monitoring actually and observing classes and interaction at scale is very difficult because of the lack of visibility of viewing a classroom as a whole. People have their videos off, etc. But also safeguarding, because it brings up so many challenges in terms of being able to supervise spaces that different individuals are in. So I'll leave it there, and thank you very much. Here are some of our links that you can get us on, either on our website or our Twitter handles. And if you'd like to reach out to me, you're more than welcome. But we have questions now, I think. So hand back to Susannah.
Thank you, Ben. And I'm literally just about to join you on Twitter. So, and I hope everyone else can do the same. These are great opportunities, everyone. Really fascinating piece of work. And I was nodding my head vigorously as you were talking, because I recognized so much of what you were saying in terms of pedagogies everywhere, regardless of who they're with, as we've doubly pivoted around COVID, those of us trying to teach virtually. But really fascinating to think about that in the context of access to education for refugees, but in the different contexts in which you work. So I'm going to open up to the floor for questions. If you want to ask a question, you've got a number of options. You can put it in the chat, come onto mic, put up your hand, put something in the Google Jamboard. I'm monitoring as many of those as I can. Over to all of you. Who would like to be first to ask a question?
Could I kick off, please, Susannah?
Please do.
Yeah. First of all, just that was brilliant, brilliant work you guys are doing in Jordan. Jordan, you talk about innovations, and interestingly, we bought 6 containers and made them into little houses for families. And one of the containers, we made doors and windows, etc., to make sure it was made into a school for children. So just because obviously, schools are either broken up or they're not there at all. So that's one thing we did. Just a suggestion of what, in a non-refugee situation, non-COVID situation I'm talking about, that the way we delivered education in Gujarat in India and also in Pakistan is that whilst they're we talk about the middle children, secondary school children we're talking about, who have difficult access to education. We thought we'd give them skills such as dressmaking or plumbing or electricals or whatever. And whilst they're doing it, they also have English classes. So they actually, when they come out, and a lot of them leave early, they've got some sort of a skill. A lot of people that are working in Dubai, for example, now as electricians and on thousands of these buildings, some of them actually come from our workshops in Pakistan. And lastly, you talked about safeguarding. Just a thought, deafness is a big problem. And I know Steve very well, who is the chairman and chief executive of Deaf Kids International. I think he's working in Jordan. You may know him, and it's something that you could connect up with. If not, I can connect you up with him. because it is a big safeguarding issue, is deafness in children, and I'm sure he's working in Jordan.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't know him, but that would be great to connect. And actually, it would be interesting to think about how you would adapt this to people, to students who are deaf, because that's not something we have done yet. It would be interesting to look into that. And yeah, absolutely, the things you said around innovating with different pieces of, or I guess you're kind of upcycling there for classrooms. Sounds like fantastic work.
Great. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Professor Gatrad. Over to you for more questions. The floor is open. Do put your hand up or come on to mic. I'm at the moment, Ben, looking at your social media volunteer opportunity that I'm going to be spreading the word amongst my students around. That looks really interesting. And I think it may be something that Dr. Hanaa may be talking about as well in terms of her areas of specialism. But I had a question for you, which is about the experience you've had in working in the very different contexts of Turkey and Jordan, and how the particular solutions you have developed and the particular ways you've had to pivot around COVID-19 have worked in different ways because of those two very different contexts. I wonder if you could comment on that. Yeah, actually, the English program we have isn't yet in Turkey. It's just in Jordan, Lebanon. But the other area of our program, our guidance program, is. I mean, so the differences in working with those contexts, obviously some of them are policy, so there are very different policies in terms of citizenship and access to employment between Turkey, which is relatively more progressive than Jordan and Lebanon. I think the kind of distinction I draw is between Lebanon and those other two countries, both in terms of stability and then technology. Lebanon is where we've seen the largest challenges in terms of access to technology and access to consistent connections, and as well as the political instability that we've seen over the last 18 months. So we've had to, what we tend to do in places like Lebanon is, I mentioned at the start, we provide our programs as open to community organizations. And what we try to do is keep them as modular and non-platform specific as possible, so that they can be adapted to different technologies that may work in those different locations. So for example, I mean, over the last 6 months, the guidance program that we've been running has been adapted by several different partners to be working on different platforms between Turkey and Lebanon and Jordan. And so that's how we tend to do it. We're not very prescriptive in how we adapt our programs across locations. It's usually working in kind of co-designing it with the community organizations that we're working with. Okay, thank you. Really interesting. Any other questions for Ben at this stage? You know how to be in touch with him. Perhaps, Ben, you could pop your contact details in the chat as well. The things that were on your last slide, your Twitter handle, etc. That would be really helpful for people, and then we can connect with you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so please be in touch with Ben if you've got any questions for him. And so that brings us to our last presentation today. Last but very much not least, I'm going to invite Dr. Hanaa Albanna to join us. Dr. Hanaa works at Global One and is the, now I'm trying to get up your very long title, Dr. Hanaa, the International Initiatives Manager. It's quite a tongue twister, but before you go ahead, Dr. Hanaa, I just wanted to read to people the title of your PhD thesis. Dr. Hanaa has a really interesting area of specialism, and I referred to it earlier when I was thanking Ben for his session, but her title of her thesis was The Use of Social Media in the Public Relations Practice, the Case of Non-Profit Organizations in Jordan. So she covers many bases, but today she's going to be talking to us about gender health and humanitarian response. And I'm assuming based on the experience of Global One. Dr. Hanaa, over to you. You have the standard 15 minutes and there'll be an opportunity to ask you questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susannah. Thank you so much to all the participants. And yes, we will try to stick to the 15 minutes exactly. So let me just start by giving a brief introduction about Global One. Global One is a UK-based women-led international development organization. Mainly, we work across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East region with 6 country offices in Kenya, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Somalia, and Jordan. We partner locally to create sustainable development solutions to increase knowledge and promoting positive behavioral change in global health, education, agriculture, livelihood, and water, sanitation, and hygiene. We believe the answer to global inequalities lies in leadership from all sections of society, including women. Therefore, we actively train and support women leaders of the future through our projects and within the organization. Also, Global One is the coordinator of the Alliance of NGOs and CSOs for South-South cooperation. Maybe I will not take much time now to introduce the Alliance and tell you more about the Alliance, but maybe I can give you brief about the Alliance in the 10 minutes, in the last 10 minutes when we have the discussion. Let me now start with the presentation, which, as we mentioned, is about gender, health, and the humanitarian response. First, I will brief about the Sustainable Development Goals. As you all know, following the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, the United Nations created 17 Sustainable Development Goals with the hope of achieving all by 2030. So this 2030 agenda is a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. And those, the 17 SDGs are all integrated, and they recognize that action in one area will affect outcomes in others, and that development must balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability. Through the pledge of the SDGs to leave no one behind, countries have committed to fast-track progress for those furthest behind. This is why the SDGs are designed to bring the world to several life-changing zeros, including zero poverty, hunger, AIDS, and discrimination against women and girls. So everyone is needed to reach these ambitious targets. The creativity, know-how, technology, and financial resources from all society is necessary to achieve the SDGs in every context. As we all know, as I mentioned, the MDGs have achieved substantial success in increasing equality education across the regions. However, MDGs has had several limitations. The SDG 5, when talking about gender equality, SDG 5 mainly builds upon MDG 3 and has become more complex to match the intensity of tackling gender equality. As we all know, prior to 1970, gender was typically missing from development, from the development strategies, as economic development was prioritized over human development. But when the issue of gender equality has gained popularity, the approach to gender equality focused more on integrating women to development. And this integration primarily focused on ensuring women's participation into the global economic system through improving the status of women rather than a transformational approach to gender and development, as we more now see. So this approach aimed only to absorb women into existing systems without addressing the root issues which causes gender inequality. Another criticism of this approach was the fact that it was viewed women's issues in isolation to development rather than considering the relationship between the two. After that, new view of gender and development emerged in opposition to women in development approach, and this approach took a more radical approach. Proponents of this approach mainly argued that women have always been part of the development, therefore don't need integration, and this approach mainly focused more on how women and development processes interlink. Women and development, of course, had its limitation and was later replaced by the gender and development approach. And this approach offers a holistic perspective looking at all aspects of women's life. So why this focus on women in specific? Few statistics here. Women account for 70% of those living on less than $1 a day. Women spend twice as much time as men on unpaid work. 2/3 of the illiterate people in the world are female. Women and girls account for 80% of the victims of human trafficking, and 5 million girls each year get married before they are 18. 1 in 3 women will experience sexual or domestic violence at some point in their lives. So shocking statistics will give us indication why we need that much focus on women's issues and women and sustainable development. So what is gender equality? When we talk about gender equality, it's SDG 5. Mainly gender refers to the cultural and social construct attached to male and females, attaching those different rules, norms, customs, and practices between male and females has led to this genders pertaining different value and power within society. So, we have, as you all see, we have gender 5, which is achieve gender equality and empower women and girls worldwide. I've listed here the the targets that we have under SDG 5. Because really it's very important for us, for all humanitarian practitioners working in the humanitarian field, whether you are focusing on women and girls or not, if you are working more on like education aspects, covering both women, girls and boys, or whether just you are developing humanitarian aid, I think it's very important for all of us to focus on SDG 5 and to look at the targets that we have under SDG 5. And we all know that without SDG 5, we can't achieve the rest of the SDGs. Target 5.1, which is end all forms of discrimination against all women and girls everywhere. I will not explain much about these targets. So maybe Isabel hopefully will share the slides after we finish this conference, and you will get all the slides as well. So target 5.2, to eliminate all harmful practices such as child, early and forced marriage, and female genital mutilation. And we all know about this huge problem. Target 5.3, which is to eliminate all harmful practices such as child, early and forced marriage, and female genital mutilation. We have target 5.4, which is to recognize and value unpaid care and domestic work through the provision of public services, infrastructure, and social protection policies, and the promotion of shared responsibility within the household and the family as nationally as appropriate. Moving to target 5.5, which is to ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. As we all know, in many instances, particularly for women and girls living in poverty, there is restricted or no access to sexual and reproductive health care and information regarding their reproductive rights. And also in other countries, lack of education and control over women's reproductive and sexual health causes many adverse conditions for women. So very important issues. 5.6 5.7, which is focused mainly on to undertake reforms to give women equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to ownership and control over land and other forms of property, financial services, and natural resources. 5.8, to enhance and use of enabling technology, in particular information and communication technology, to promote the empowerment of women. And the last one is 5.9, which is to adopt and strengthen, and this is one of the main and most important one also, which is to adopt and strengthen sound policies and enforceable legislation for the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls at all levels. So we all know that no one or none of the countries will achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in isolation. As we mentioned, everyone is needed in this equation. We need all the resources, that's expertise and the knowledge from the private sector, from the government, from the grassroots organizations in order to access or proceed with these Sustainable Development Goals. And we are now find ourselves nearly a third of the way through the Sustainable Development Goals timeline. And recently, the Sustainable Development Goals report 2020 painted a disturbing picture of the stagnant progress toward achieving the SDGs by the 2030 deadline. And this report also highlighted the damaging impact of COVID-19 on the SDG progress in general and SDG 5 in specific. That's why a lot of work maybe from the women-led organizations, from the organizations that focus on women are needed in order to tackle all these challenges. Now I'm just gonna give you a little bit information in the last few minutes that I have about a report that we conducted as part of our work. As I mentioned, we as Global One, we focus on many thematic areas and mainstreams. Research is one of the main aspects that we are focusing on within our work, plus the humanitarian aid, plus the humanitarian development, plus the policy and advocacy work. So when it comes to research, we conduct this research in Lebanon and Syria, and it was titled A Gender-Focused Religio-Cultural Assessment Amongst Displaced Syrian Women in Lebanon and Syria. As we all know, the situation within the Syrian refugees, and either we're talking about in Lebanon, Jordan, or Syria. And mainly if we're talking about Lebanon and Syria, we know that the water, the healthcare, hygiene support are one of the primary importance in helping these women. Many thousands of those women are without comfort, security, and basic necessity. Therefore, this research highlights the need for a more focused and a context-specific understanding of Syrian women, and to highlight the issues that often overlooked by the humanitarian actors. Mainly about the aims of the research was mainly to develop an improved understanding of the gendered impact of the Syrian conflict, to explore the intersection of religious and cultural traditions within these issues, cultivate detailed recommendations for international agencies, local and international NGOs and national governments, and the last one, to help to plan and implement gendered and religio-cultural sensitive programs which address the specific needs of women. The research question that we had, mainly, what are the effects of statelessness on Syrian women's water, sanitation, and hygiene needs? How does faith intersect the water, sanitation, and hygiene of Syrian women? What are the current gaps in government, NGOs, and humanitarian assistance program in refugees and internally displaced person camps? And how can sustainable development intersect current humanitarian programs to refugees, women's needs? Hopefully, I will share this presentation, and also I will share a link for the report so you can have a look at all the findings. And because within this report, we highlighted the gaps that exist within these refugee camps, and also we highlighted recommendations for local NGOs, for the local government within Lebanon and Syria, and also for the international development organizations working on these areas. Mainly with this research, we targeted 836 female participants. Those females completed the survey in 3 locations across both countries. And mainly one of the main findings, we have several findings, honestly, because of the time, I couldn't put the main findings, but as I mentioned, you can look at all these findings in the report. But mainly 65% noted that general medical care was available, but gender specific services such as reproductive health services and female hygiene services were minimal. We had many findings when it comes to menstrual hygiene management in regards to products, to access to hygiene tools, menstrual hygiene practices, religious practices, cleaning and disposal, effects of menstruation. We also had findings when it related to water, wash infrastructure, access to latrines, bathing facilities, safety concerns. Also, when it comes to health and hygiene, food and waste, hand washing, health concerns, plus also raising awareness and changing behaviors. We also had findings related to religious beliefs and practices, and lastly, emotional and physical support. The main recommendations from this report, as I mentioned, it has many recommendations to all the 3 parties, local NGOs, international NGOs, and governments. But I've just included few recommendations here that governments, international institutions, and NGOs have a responsibility to provide universal access to sexual and reproductive health care services. And humanitarian approaches must utilize an integrated host community approach. NGOs should ensure their humanitarian approach is not constructed to a homogeneous framework. Planning for a humanitarian situation should involve consultation with religious and cultural grassroots organizations who can offer support in ensuring that facilities are better suited to the refugee community. International institutions also must implement a specific gender-focused framework which will outline the specific health needs of women. This would focus, but not limited to, maternal, mental, sexual, and reproductive health. And implementing such a strategy, government and humanitarian actors should be held accountable to these accords, ensuring the implementation of gender-specific health program. So lastly, as a conclusion, the international community must bridge the gap between humanitarian intervention and sustainable development. And this must take into account the specific religious, cultural, and gender needs of refugees to ensure that women are empowered and prepared to face their lives in statelessness. Thank you so much, Susannah, and thank you so much for the rest of the participants.
Thank you, Dr. Hanaa. That was fantastic. I know how difficult and demanding it is to explain extremely complex research in such a time-constrained scenario. So all power to you. So we've had an incredible tour de force there in trying to outline some of the contextual issues, but also the very specific research findings that we have in front of us. And I wonder whether there are any people who would like to kick off with some questions. Over to you on the mic if you would like to.
Sorry, Susannah, could I ask, it was a brilliant presentation. Could I
over to you, Professor.
make a comment perhaps even? one of the things that you may have mentioned during the morning session, but something, we talk about fragile, I talk about failure in my own attempts to do something. And one of my failures has been to try and set up something that would help rectovaginal fistulae. Now, these are, again, to do with pediatrics and gynecological women problems. Difficulty with birth often leads to some of these complications, which lead to women swelling all the time of feces. And more often than not, these women can't get jobs, can't stay in the home. They often go away to villages and kill themselves. High rate of suicide in these women. So I just wondered whether the doctor had any comment on, is there anything being done along those lines? For example, in Ethiopia, they have a fantastic setup. And since then, I think there's a setup in Boston that has taken over this work, which is rectovaginal fistulae, which it is a minor operation according to gynecologists, but it can be done. It's something that would help. I think you talked about current gap in government and NGO thinking, and I think this could be something that I think is very important, not spoken loudly by anybody, because partly it's a patriarchal society, not only in the Middle East, but also in India, Pakistan, and parts of Africa. That's one bit. The second bit is that you talked about genital mutilation. I know in England and the UK, it's actually illegal, but in the countries where it isn't, it'll continue until the cows come home. So what can be done about that? Just a question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. In regards to the first question, so we, as a global one, we have a very big project when it comes to fistula and the operations for those women. And we had this collaboration with Comic Relief. It was a 3 years project mainly in Kenya and in Garissa country. It still existed till the moment. We had a very big project. We trained nurses and doctors on this kind of operation, and we supplied all the resources, the equipments, and the medical clinics. We built the medical clinics in partnership with Garissa Health Ministry, and we did like a huge efforts in that, in also integrating the faith actors in this problem, because as you mentioned, sometimes maybe the acceptance of the community or the acceptance of how women would be have like such operations, sometimes it's not easy. So we partnered with local faith actors to encourage women to get such operations, because we believe, as the professor mentioned, this problem will affect women really in getting out of the house. Sometimes those women won't get out of the house for anything, even to buy stuff or to get water or anything else. So imagine how that would affect on her mental life, or plus physical life. So and we are trying to look for more donors, trying to look for more partnerships to implement the same model of this partnership between ministries, between health ministries in other areas, because it was one of the main successful project that we had. And we also we partnered also with many other local institutions as well. With regards to the second question, which is genital mutilation, one of the main aspects of our work is to work with local community leaders and faith leaders to make the practice or the behavioral change more acceptable. So as you mentioned, the problem that when it comes to FGM, it's acceptable, and some faith leaders are encouraging, even parents encouraging families to proceed with this FGM. So we try to work with faith leaders to let them understand that it's not part of our religion. We develop toolkits, health toolkits for all community leaders and faith leaders, and also we partner with figures, with faith leaders that they are influenced, they have their influence in their communities, and we bring them to become part of the solution, because those community people are really so conservative. They would listen to such influencers, faith community leaders, and this was mainly one of the main strategies that we implement when dealing with FGM.
No, thank you. Could I just follow on from that? Because I'd be happy to work with you, Dr. Hanaa, about and even become a donor towards, if there's a collaboration between your organization and ours as NGOs. You involve governments more often than not, things don't happen. There's too much bureaucracy. I tend not to involve governments. I just do it at local NGO level. So if you were to put something in chat, I think Balbir is there, one of my other lieutenants. So she would take your email address, or I will, so that we can communicate along these lines and see if there's a commonality of thinking. Because this is something that I've failed with, and I would like to rectify that failure at some point.
Sure, that would be fantastic. And just one comment, Professor, here regarding integrating the government, because sometimes when you talk about the sustainability of the project, sometimes it's hard for organizations to sustain, the funds for such projects. So that's why we integrated, or we collaborated with the ministry, so they can take the lead. They would manage these medical clinics to ensure it will sustain. It will not just, if we for example, the funds, because as I mentioned, it was funded by Comic Relief. So it's, as you all know, it's just within 3-4 years, it's limited. So that's why we try to include the government in order to ensure that it will be a sustainable project.
No, I totally agree with you, and I accept what you're saying. And perhaps that's the best way to do it. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks to both of you. Sorry, Dr. Hanaa, carry on.
Yeah, just maybe I will mention in the few minutes about the Alliance of NGOs. I've highlighted the Alliance of the NGOs, and that global one is the coordinator of the Alliance of NGOs and CSOs for South-South cooperation, and it's a joint initiative between Global One and the United Nations Office for South-South cooperation. And maybe here it's a good platform also to encourage all grassroots organizations and NGOs from the different regions to join the alliance. I will also maybe in the chat box, I will highlight and put the website. So mainly the aim of this alliance is to capacity build and equip the NGOs within the Global South through the sharing of knowledge, expertise, success stories, and best practices to ensure and or to accelerate the achievement toward the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's also a very good platform for all NGOs, especially grassroots organizations, to join the alliance, and also to get all informations, updates, and trainings and toolkits to develop their work and to share these such practices, because we believe that there's huge success stories in the Global South, but sometimes because it's not shared, a lot of other organizations would fail, would sometimes do some mistakes. But it's very good to have such platform to share the best practices, and sometimes to share the mistakes that we do, so others would not repeat the same.
Thank you, Dr. Hanaa. And that was a point I was going to pick up, that it's not often on these occasions that one hears somebody as eminent as Professor Gatrad talking about his failures. And I think that's something that the sector needs more, a little bit more openness and transparency about failures, which then enable us to move forward and improve. I have one question for you that's popped up on the Google Jamboard. Somebody's asking, what aspects of SDG 5 do you think have most been negatively impacted by COVID-19?
I would say all targets maybe have been affected, but I would say mainly it's gender-based violence. As we all know, 30% more increase in reported cases have been recorded in a lot of the country, even within, sometimes we say in the North or Europe countries, but it was worldwide. It's a shadow pandemic. This is what they call it now, shadow pandemic alongside COVID-19. So this is mainly, I would say, the impact that we had on SDG 5.
Thank you. That's a sobering thought. Just to notice in the chat that Isabel has kindly put the link to the Alliance. So those of you who are interested, please have a look there, and presumably if anyone's got any questions, they could come back to you, Dr. Hanaa.
Please, yeah.
Maybe you could put your email address in the chat as well for them.
Yes, I will
so
put
that
it.
we can pick up with that as well. So at this point, I am going to apologise for something that I didn't do right at the start, which was to introduce you all to the newly appointed Chief Executive of McAndrew Leadership, who is with us here, Mostafijur, and I'd like to invite him to actually make some closing remarks now, because I think you've heard quite enough of my voice, and I'm going to close with passing over to him. But on my behalf, and thank you so much. It's been a really interesting session. I've learned a lot, connected with loads of people, connected on Twitter, connected on LinkedIn. It's all been happening round the back here, and that's the nature of these events. So over to you to do some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Susannah. Hello, everyone. This is quite a daunting task because Dr. Susannah, I feel like keep going. You know, it was wonderful actually. So let's give her a round of applause. You have done a phenomenal job, and so do the discussion, distinguished discussion. They have come up with their extensive experience, analysis, insightful thoughts, and some of the experiences sounds like these are life lessons for us. So we pretty much appreciate your time, your thoughts, your energy, your great efforts in making this conference a great success. So from McAndrew, even from my end, sincere gratitude to you all for making the time to be a part of this wonderful conference. And this is, to tell you frankly, the way we think. This is just the beginning. We are trying to create a vibrant platform for everyone where basically the private sector NGO can collaborate together, because sustainable development goals is never possible for the governments or the development actors only to deliver. We all need to work together. And today it has been a phenomenal example, like how people from different spheres of the society, they can come together and talk about the humanitarian landscape, some of the challenges, opportunities, some of the best practices, and so on. So we have been tremendously enriched because of all your excellent participation. Again, thanks a lot, everybody, and special thanks to McAndrew, Maya. She has actually, she from the very outset, she was very keen in organizing this session. So from leadership, from McAndrew Leadership, again, thank you everybody to be a part of this wonderful event today. And we very much look forward to staying in touch, and hope to see you again in near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to round it off and say I promised that I would deliver this event by 3:30, and with 2 minutes to go, bang on. So lovely to see you all. It was great. Let's stay in touch. Thanks again. Have a good afternoon. Those of you celebrating Ramadan, Ramadan Kareem.
Thank you.